A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller, and today we talk to a worker at Ultium Cells from Spring Hill, Tennessee, about his fellow workers' recent unionization with the United Auto Workers. We also talk about some Volkswagen international news and respond to some of this anti-Haitian worker stuff. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can give us a call at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week and we might respond to it on the next program if you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm, where we did just launch our revamped website. It doesn't look too different. It's really mostly for us on the back end kind of administration stuff. The website that we were using before was really difficult to write articles in the formatting. It was all very, very, it was just very difficult and time intensive to do stuff. So it's mostly for us, but it does look a little sleeker. So check it out, tvlr.fm. We're also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts at The Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We've also got a bunch of cool merchandise for sale at tvlr.fm/store. We have our logo dad cap. Uh-oh. Says we're not hearing it on WVNN. Give me just a second while I text somebody from WVNN. Okay, there we go. Sent the text. So, we got a bunch of cool merchandise for sale at tvlr.fm/store. We have our logo dad cap. We have some of our Join a Union tees left, and pre-orders are open for our union-made matchbooks and a new t-shirt that says unionize, but looks like the Supreme logo. So check that out. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then please do think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that at tvlr.fm/contact.
Oh, yeah, we definitely appreciate all of those union sponsors, all of you individual donors, everybody who shares, everybody who donates and pitches in. Really makes a difference. This is a grassroots media project, and we can't do it without you. So let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. And we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard union activists who believe that Alabama and the South's labor movement and our working class really deserve a bigger platform. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front. And again, we can't do it without your support. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener today. We really appreciate you spending some time with us.
That's right. And with that out of the way, we will jump right into Last Week in Southern Labor, a segment where we check out what workers in the United States South and the American colonies were up to in the last week. This time, here's what workers in the U.S. South and the colonies were up to from September 6th to the 13th. In new union campaigns, 1,447 workers across 13 bargaining units are in new union elections. 3 workers at CAE USA Incorporated in Meridian, Mississippi, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 12 workers at Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC, in Dallas, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the IAMAW. 14 workers at Starbucks in Alpharetta, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United, as did 23 more Starbucks workers in Nashville, Tennessee. 9 workers at Carrere in LaPorte, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Chemical Workers Union Council, affiliated with the UFCW. 24 workers at Texair Company in McAllen, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters, UA Local 211. 7 workers at Wells Fargo in Anniston, Alabama, filed a petition to hold a union election with Wells Fargo Workers United, CWA. Very exciting. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 197 workers at AD USA Transportation in Dunn, North Carolina, demonstrated support for unionization with the Teamsters, Local 391. 9 security guards at Hanna Technologies and Systems in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with the Federal Contract Guards of America, FCGOA. And as listeners of the program will know, there are different labor regimes in different sectors of the economy and parts of the country. One of those sectors with different labor regimes is the public sector, and it is extremely difficult to find all the data for public sector organizing in the South. Fortunately for us, though, at least in Florida, friend of the show, McKenna Schuler, has begun a newsletter similar to ours, but just for Florida, and she always includes all of the public sector organizing updates that she gets from the Florida public sector equivalent of the National Labor Relations Board. She releases these updates monthly, so we are going to begin incorporating those new elections and campaigns into our newsletter when they come out, with her permission, obviously. But there's still a lot of other stuff in our newsletter that is worth reading, including more detail and reporting on these individual campaigns. So make sure that you subscribe to our newsletter after you hear the latest updates from Florida public sector organizing from us. You can do that at caringclassrevolt.com. caringclassrevolt.com by McKenna Schuler. 680 workers at the City of Clearwater in Clearwater, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Communication Workers of America, CWA, after having recently been decertified. 289 workers at the Florida School for the Deaf and Blind filed a petition to hold a union election with the Independent Association of Public and Private Employees, IAPPE. 106 workers at the city of Pensacola in Pensacola, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with IAPPE. 74 workers at the University of West Florida in Ferry Pass, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with IAPPE. 3 petitions to hold union elections with the Fraternal Order of Police, 2 of those petitions, and the Florida Police Benevolent Association, one of those petitions, among cops in St. Johns County and at the University of Central Florida, respectively, were dismissed because both unions had out-of-date registration documents. A petition by the FOP to raid a unit of city workers at the city of West Palm Beach in West Palm Beach, Florida, currently represented by the Service Employees International Union, SEIU, was rejected because of the out-of-date registration and also because the SEIU's contract with the city is not about to expire. 3 workers at the Bay Shore Fire Protection and Rescue Service District filed a petition to hold a union election with the Southwest Florida Professional Firefighters and Paramedics, Local 1826, affiliated with IAFF. In election results, 81 workers across 6 bargaining units are newly unionized, and 248 workers in 3 units voted against unionizing, and 53 workers in 1 public sector unit in Florida voted to maintain their union. 2 workers at Keolis Transit Services in Leesburg, Virginia voted 1-0 in favor of unionization with the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, Local 689. 34 workers at Wood County Electric Cooperative in Quitman, Texas voted 34-0 in favor of unionization with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 738. 196 workers at Walsh and Albert Company in Houston, Texas voted 49-109 against unionization with the United Steelworkers, USW, Local 54. 53 workers at Lafayette County Public Schools in Lafayette, Florida voted 20-0 in favor of maintaining their union. 2 workers at the New Port Richey Fire Department voted 2-0 in favor of unionization with the Clearwater Firefighters Association, Local 1158, affiliated with IAFF. South Daytona City employees, not just cops, voted 15-14 against unionization with the International Union of Police Associations, IUPA. Cops at the City of Daytona Shores voted 0-23 against unionization with the IUPA. Makes you wonder how how many people they had sign that petition. Firefighters at the Indian River County Fire Department voted 6-2 in favor of unionization with the Indian River County Firefighter/Paramedic Association, affiliated with the IAFF. Cops for the Pensacola State College voted 3-0 in favor of unionization with the Florida Police Benevolent Association, FPBA. And 32 workers at the town of Bay Harbor Islands in Bay Harbor Islands, Florida voted 81% in favor of unionization with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, Local 966. In settlements, grievances, and unfair labor practices, as the fight between the UAW and Stellantis over investment, specifically reopening the Belvidere, Illinois plant, heats up, Stellantis dealers have weighed in sort of on the side of the UAW, with the dealers claiming that CEO Carlos Tavares is responsible for a, quote, rapid degradation of the brands because of, quote, short-term decision-making. The SPLC union conducted a vote of no confidence in the CEO of the organization, with 92% of the union voting no confidence in the leadership of CEO Margaret Wong. In strikes and bargaining updates, with 95% turnout and 87% support, American Airlines flight attendants, unionized with the Association of Professional Flight Attendants, APFA, voted to ratify a new 5-year contract with the company that includes a 20% raise, among other benefits that the union claims adds $4.2 billion in value to the contract. The American Postal Workers Union put out a bargaining update on Twitter last week, laying out some of the union's 80 proposals to management, which include bridging the tiered employment structure, improving safety, and management's 11 proposals to the union. You can also go back and listen to the National President Demenstein's recent appearance on the Valley Labor Report for other topics of discussion around the negotiations. The Teamsters responded to a recent statement by Costco as they continue national negotiations, claiming that the company is misleading its employees about the state of negotiations and the position of the Teamsters. The Bird Union, CWA Local 1180, representing workers at environmental conservation group, the National Autobahn Society, ratified a new contract ahead of a strike deadline. As the CWA continues its strike against AT&T in the South, they are now threatening a strike against the company in the West as well, after members voted down a tentative agreement in that region. Verizon has gone public with its interest in purchasing Frontier. CWA, which represents workers at both companies, issued a statement saying that they are, quote, watching closely, but notably not opposing the deal outright. CWA has a history of supporting mergers when they believe that they can secure concessions from the company for their support. In political and legislative updates, USPS has begun rolling out new mail trucks to rave reviews from carriers. The new trucks include AC for the first time. That's it for our union and labor updates. If we missed anything, send us a note at tvlr.fm/contact, and we'll include it in the next round of updates. We're going to take a break really quick, and we're going to be right back talking to Ultium worker Derek Kinzer and UAW Servicing Representative Chuck it's not McDonald. Davenport. I don't know why I keep thinking McDonald. Chuck Davenport. We'll be right back, folks. Stay tuned.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Folks, labor creates all wealth should go to labor. You are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. We have on the line UAW Servicing Representative Chuck Davenport and Ultium worker Derek Kinzer. Derek, Chuck, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Appreciate your time this morning.
By the hall that was instrumental at Ultium is Frank Allen.
I'm sorry, could you, we accidentally had you muted there for a second, and I just caught the last where you mentioned Frank Allen. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, he happened to stop by the union hall this morning. He's just sitting here while we were doing this. So he's been instrumental in the Ultium campaign as well.
Great, great. Well, happy to have anybody from over there that we can. Love to hear from folks in successful union campaigns about what's been going on over there. So appreciate y'all's time. And so I'll start with you, Derek. If you could you tell folks that are listening why Ultium workers wanted to unionize in the first place?
Well, appreciate you having me. It had a lot to do with just a lot of different issues. We're, seeing gaps in one department to the other on standards, on how they operate. Safety issues was a big one for me. Just a lot of inconsistencies. Managers, supervisors allowing things here and not allowing it there, and just we need that union to keep things standardized and have accountability, I feel like, for the management.
Right. And that was mentioned, I think that was actually the first thing that was mentioned in one of the recent UAW videos about the campaign, announcing, I think, the victory. And it's something that I was really excited by because, when we talk about union campaigns, and especially when people hear about union campaigns, the first thing they think about is the wages, right? That union workers want to make more money. And we do want to make more money, and we do make more money, but it's also about that level of control in your workplace, that level of that ability to not be completely at the whim of your employer to do whatever they want every day that you come into work, and not worried about like, oh, is what I'm doing today going to be totally different? Is the boss going to have a totally different kind of line today? You have an amount of consistency and control on the job, and that's something that I really think that we can do more as union workers ourselves to emphasize and to talk to people about, because I think that's a very common issue that people have.
Yep. Yeah, I feel like if those saying, if you treat people like kids, they'll act like kids. You treat them like adults, they'll act like that. If you empower them, to make decisions, to take ownership in their areas, they're more likely to be more successful, and the company's going to be more successful. So,
exactly. And so, even granting the issues that you had, with low pay and the working conditions that were kind of changing pretty regularly, lots of workplaces across the country have issues like that, and unfortunately, for one reason or another, union campaigns either don't get off the ground at these workplaces or they fall short when they come to an election. But y'all were able to win your union. You got voluntary recognition. And so, I'm interested in what were some of the ways that you were able to get people to support the campaign, and fight back against some of the anti-union propaganda that management and the culture really beats into us. And I guess, Frank, interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, I actually had to go head on with some of the, the supervisors and the leads over there in the building, as far as, them making threats towards the workers, as far as if you talk about the union, if you mention the union, if you, even inkle that you're interested in the union, you're going to get fired. And I kind of stepped out to draw them out to say, that is wrong information. This plant will become union. Not only is it our right to unionize, but, if somebody can stand on the line and talk about sports, they can talk about the union as well. And as far as that goes, I was always taught that, if you give a man a tool, he can build a building, but if you give him the knowledge, he can build the city. And a lot of these folks in here, not only do they need the information, but they need the training as well, that the union provides. And I think it's a big step for us.
Right. Derek, what about you? What were some of the things that you heard from your fellow workers that may have been that maybe were initially skeptical, and what were some of the ways that you were able to overcome that skepticism?
Well, you get all kinds of information, feedback. A lot of it was like, they were trying to match what the union was doing in Ohio, our parent plant, and so like they were giving us a bonus, they were getting profit sharing, and they would, like, well, they're going to take that profit sharing away from us, or that bonus, I'm sorry, or or the GM workers that are here close to us, they're going to take our jobs, and just all kinds of misinformation like that. But the way I countered anything, and it's the way I've always approached being 18 years union, is when I'm talking to someone back, I say, it's just basically like this phone here. You got a contract with that company to have this phone service. It's the same way. It's a simple contract between me and that employer. And instead of me having to go fight for my wages, me go have to fight for training, we're going as a collective unit. And a lot of times when you approach it simple like that, a lot of people, it makes sense to them. I feel like that helped a lot.
Right. And Chuck, what about you? Was there anything that sticks out as you were, supporting these workers in the campaign and trying to help them think through some of these arguments that they were hearing against the union? Anything that sticks out to you as something notable?
Well, it was one of the things was they were the Ultium Cells they would start giving them wage increases, which we're all for. But like what we said, there was so much information around. We told them, hey, GM workers are not coming over there. They can't take your job. We told them what the process was, how that works. We also told them that, hey, just because they're giving something to you now don't mean they could take it back if you don't have a collective bargaining agreement. And so, we had a very good in-plant committee. These two gentlemen were very instrumental in that, to go around and talk on break and stuff like that in the parking lot. We had people coming to the Union Hall, which is right down the street. We were trying to give them everything that they were saying that were being told was wrong. We were giving them the correct information so they could go back into the plant. And we finally got some of that turned around early. Whereas the company's like anything, they're trying to scare people. So we were able, with the help of our in-plant committee, to get that turned around so that people were getting the right information.
And so, Frank, you may not know this, but we're broadcasting out of Huntsville, Alabama. We're also on the radio in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, Whitesburg, Kentucky, and New Orleans, Louisiana. But I think the only auto plant that is in our listening area that folks are going to hear just on the radio. We're also online, but the only auto plant that I can think of that's within our radio listening area, I believe, is the Toyota plant in Huntsville, Toyota Mazda. And it's not union right now. Obviously, the UAW has a big campaign to organize. The goal is all of the non-union automotive manufacturing facilities in the country, with a huge portion of them being in the South, including, obviously, this Toyota plant. And so, I hear from Toyota workers. I hear from some people that are interested in the union. I hear from some people that are maybe not as interested in the union. But they're watching the UAW. All of these stories, they watched the strike last year. They watched the really good contract that the UAW was able to get. They watched the election at Volkswagen and then in Mercedes. I think the Ultium unionization has kind of gone under the radar, and so we hope to be a part of the corrective on that and make sure that people know about it. But for the Toyota workers that are listening right now, maybe working, maybe they've got a headphone in and they're listening to us right now. What would you have to say to them? What would be some of your advice, or what would your message be to them if you were able to talk to them?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Toyota, because a few years ago, I was going to accept a position at Toyota. I went down and interviewed, and some of the benefits and some of the conditions, didn't reach my level of acceptable as far as what they had to offer. And I've worked for different plants around, that were union and weren't union. I worked at Nissan plant over here in Tennessee, which was not union. I worked at GM over here in Spring Hill, which is Tennessee. And I find that the best working conditions and the best working class of people are union. They have the best training in the world, and they're the most, honest and reliable people that you can depend on.
Right. I think that's That's worth taking into account, and the idea that having that better training and the safety is another thing that is something that I don't think that folks that are outside of unions think about very much when they think of what are the benefits of unionization. The guaranteed higher level of training and the higher level of safety that you get. There was a study that came out, I think it was sometime last year, about safety in coal mines. And union coal mines have something like up to an 80% less rate of fatalities within the coal mines. I mean, you are 80% less likely to die in a mine if the mine is unionized. That's a huge step up. I don't think the difference is as drastic in an auto plant, but it is pretty drastic. I think there was a recent report from Alabama Arise that maybe y'all are familiar with, maybe you're not. The UAW's used it extensively in their Mercedes campaign that talked about how an Alabama auto worker is 30% more likely to go through an amputation at work than an auto worker in Ohio or Michigan. These are real things, right? That folks should, take into consideration when you're considering whether, do you want to put all of this in the hands of the boss, or do you want to have some amount of control?
Right.
So
safety is the biggest one.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Chuck, if I understand correctly, the workers at Ultium now come under the national agreement, and they're immediately getting something like a 35% raise. Can you explain to us how that works, and how workers are reacting to this rapid increase in wages?
Well, they will fall right up under the national agreement. And that is one of the points that Ultium tried to use against the union. So what they did is the wages at Ultium can't be less than 75% of the UAW GM national agreement. And what they started doing when the workers started showing interest in the UAW, they started going ahead and giving them pay raises even before they were recognized as UAW. And they were doing that as a way of trying to keep us out. So there's a lot of articles, in the media saying they got an automatic jump. They were already getting a lot of that because the company was doing that to try to tell the workers, hey, we're going to pay you that way anyway. You don't need the union. But we also got a lot of the workers to understand is next week, if you're not union, they could go ahead and take that back. Yep. And there's nothing you could do because you're an employee at will. Right. And so that was a tool that the company, even though we're amalgamated local here at 1853 is a local, we have 11 different units right here in town. So there's 5,000 active UAW members that's in this town, plus probably almost that amount that's out of this local that's retired. So it was real good to have, to add the 950 here at Ultium to this local, because this town is a union town, and every supplier that comes to us or comes to the hall, we try to meet with the workers because we want to try to unionize every plant we can in town.
Right. Yeah.
They use that as a tool to try to keep us out by going ahead and front loading some of the wages, even though they hadn't fell under the national agreement.
I knew that you represented 1853 represented folks at Spring Hill, the GM plant. I actually was on the picket line over in Spring Hill in 2019. But I didn't realize that you had 10 other bargaining units. That's fantastic. Chuck, can you speak to the importance of the strong bargaining position that the UAW took and was able to win in the negotiations last year in getting this shop unionized? What's the connection there between the contract that you won last year, and these people being able to get a union?
When they took GM on and they took the big three on and they took them on and they started pulling plants out on a strike, I think that gave us a heck of a lot more leverage, because all these GM's one of them, Ford, Stellantis, they never envisioned that people in electric battery plants were going to be making the wages they're going to be making today. They wanted to keep their wages low. They didn't want them to be part of the UAW. They wanted us to have to go through campaigns. And so I think when our International Executive Board and our president, Sean Fain, had them down and had them started pulling plants out and really putting the pressure on them, it was instrumental in them able to give us and get them to agree for a card check. One of the last plants that come out that they brought out on strike was here at Spring Hill Manufacturing. And that was a big hit to General Motors because that plant not only makes ICE vehicles, which is gas, they also make electric vehicles on the same line. So they're a dual source plant. And General Motors hated to see that Cadillac Lyric not being made. So it was that give them the pressure to put them over the hump and get this agreement where we can have some neutrality and have a card check agreement in these plants.
Right. You know, Chuck, political leaders in Tennessee have really been much less vocally anti-union than in Alabama. You know, in the Mercedes campaign, we saw it was really just an onslaught. I mean, literally every week there was a new op-ed, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, from not just, you know, random people within the community, from, you know, the governor, from 6 governors in the South, from state representatives, from the commerce secretary, from, you know, just all sorts of, from preachers, you know, just all sorts of people coming out full-throatedly against the union, against the UAW. They even had a local preacher in Tuscaloosa literally walking the shop floor and encouraging people to vote against the union. I mean, really pretty disgusting stuff. And political leaders in Tennessee have engaged in stuff like that. You know, I think 2014 against Volkswagen comes to mind. But since the strike in 2023, it seems like the political leaders in Tennessee, even though there's been here and there's been some, you know, for sure they're not big fans of you guys by any means, but it seems like they've kind of more or less accepted that the UAW is in Tennessee and you're not going anywhere, and so they're not really going to be fighting you super hard. Is that how you see it, or am I just missing something?
Well, I think it's a little bit different. They are fighting us. Governor Lee and all the other Southern governors were there against Volkswagen. Governor Lee has been in the plant at Volkswagen and telling them how they don't need to be unionized. The problem, the difference here in Spring Hill is General Motors has been here since the late 80s. General Motors is this plant right here in Spring Hill is the largest General Motors plant by square foot in the world. So they don't really meddle with GM too much. It's really, I was telling some of the Ultium guys, when GM runs out is putting out a brand new product, Governor Lee, all the senators, all the county and state representatives, they're out here for a photo op. Right. So I don't think they want to take on GM. And even some of our side was concerned about, hey, if they give you card check, they're going to stop, you know, don't want to give you incentives. We negotiated the Cadillac Lyric back in 2020, and we negotiated a new investment into Spring Hill Manufacturing. Spring Hill Manufacturing is on 2,100 acres, and this Ultium plant, which is 2.8 million square feet, sits right on General Motors Spring Hill property. So the politicians like votes. They don't want to come over here and mess with the people in this area, I think that's because of the longevity and the history of GM being in Spring Hill, it's a lot different than, say, a Nissan or a Volkswagen.
I see. You know, Derek, to the extent that there has been, you know, even though at Ultium, you know, there wasn't maybe a concerted kind of anti-union campaign, but of course I'm sure that y'all saw some of the stuff from Alabama's political leaders against the Mercedes campaign, and I'm sure you saw some of the stuff against the Volkswagen campaign where people were opposed to it. What effect did that have on your coworkers at Ultium? You know, were there some people that were like, oh, well, you know, I don't think Governor Bill Lee would like this. I think that I'm probably going to abstain because of Governor Bill Lee. Were there any people like that?
I saw very little of that, more of and I think it's more of educating them on what the union does. I think even in Alabama, the stuff you're talking about, that guy walking up the shop floors and stuff. it sounds like they're not educated on really what a union is. I think a lot of times they've got a preconceived idea of what it is, and that's in no case it. But I think that's the big thing, and that's what I don't spend a lot of time with people who are going to start just putting up walls. I go to the ones who are receiving that information, and they're going to spread it amongst the other people in the community. And when they start seeing the benefits we're getting, we got to really sell that to people. Like, look what we're getting now. Look what we're getting, and that I think that's how you defeat it at Toyota too. You got to keep pushing that information out, the positive out there on them.
Right. Derek, Frank, Chuck, I really appreciate y'all taking the time to talk to us today. Is there anything that you wanted to make sure that you were able to speak about before we let you go?
I think and for all places in the South, people's got to stand up for their rights. People needs to want a seat at the table.
Yeah.
They need to better they should want to better themselves and not listen to all the rhetoric. The governors that are the politicians that get involved, they're just trying to keep unions depressed. And in turn, they're keeping good people in these plants from making a living wage. And that's what people ought to see. You're the one that pays your household bill. That governor don't.
Right.
Or that politician don't. So make things better for yourself and quit listening to all their rhetoric, because these plants that spend these companies that spend billions of dollars building these plants, they're not just going to walk away.
Right, exactly. All right, so if I'm a Toyota worker and I've been convinced I want to join the UAW, where do I go, Chuck?
Well, you could go to uaw.org. There's a avenue to reach out to organizers. We have different places that reach out to this because they see this local, and they usually direct them to the international. And then we bring in organizers or temporary organizers to do probes to see how much interest we have. So it's real easy. If they go to the international UAW website, they can go on that site and they can request contact. And if they leave their information, we will have somebody, one of our organizers in the organizing department will reach out to them.
Thank you very much, Frank.
They reach out to us in the local, or they get that information where they can reach out to the international. We have organizers down there, so I just hope the people keep fighting for their seat at the table and their voice.
Absolutely. Chuck, Frank, Derek, I really appreciate y'all's time. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Folks in the chat enjoying the conversation. Solidarity with the workers striking at Boeing and all workers. Scott says people need to be able to retire as well as get health benefits. Adam, while we were chatting, put in the chat, or while we were talking to them, put in the chat that just the threat of organizing can win big raises, but following through on organizing secures the big raises, and that's exactly right. Scott says, agreed, any increase needs to be in a contractual agreement. Otherwise, the employer can and will pull it back. The employers let these companies leave the U.S. too. That's correct. Jacob Jones in the chat says that we've got 30-something people watching and not that many likes. What's going on, folks? If you're watching us on YouTube and you haven't liked the stream yet, go ahead and do that. D.L. Cindero says, peace, comrades and fellow workers. Praise the sun, says solidarity forever. D.L. Cindero says, asks if we've been following the situation with Air Canada pilots. There's a possibility that they're going to go on strike or get locked out. I have not, actually. This is the first that I'm hearing about it. Quirky Geek Girl says the Air Canada pilot strike looming is already causing chaos in travel up here. I just gave tips for train travel if my coworker gets stranded in Vancouver on Wednesday. Wow. So we may have to check that out.
Yeah, it looks like there's a standoff between the company and the pilots union. The company's trying to get the government to intervene and prevent a strike by the pilots union. So yeah, getting really messy up there.
Like they did with the rails just a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, absolutely. That's being cited as a precedent. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see.
Over on Facebook, Joe says, morning, Mel and VLR. Just watching and eating a bagel. Mel says, good morning, brothers and sisters. I had a cat last night. Catfish. Very funny, alluding to some of this really bonkers stuff that we're hearing from the politicians. We're going to be getting to that here in a moment. 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857 is the phone number if you would like to call in. The lines are open, so feel free. 844-899-TVLR. While we're talking about UAW, I want to talk about one of the companies that they have recently unionized at. That's Volkswagen. So the largest industrial union in Europe could go on strike in October if negotiations that just begun don't go well. And there's reason to believe that they won't. The union is IG Metall, or the Industrial Union of Metal Workers in English, and they represent some 2.2 million workers in Germany and some 120,000 at Volkswagen, where negotiations just began for a new collective bargaining agreement amid turmoil. Just last week, Volkswagen said that they would be quitting a labor agreement that they have had with IG Metall that has stood since 1994 and was supposed to be in effect until 2029, which says that Volkswagen will not lay off German workers. They were able to do this, Volkswagen was, because a clause in the labor agreement said that they could nullify the deal with 3 months' notice, and so they have given that 3 months' notice. According to the New York Times, Volkswagen has also stated that they will nullify other long-standing agreements. This from the Times, including one that obligated it to offer permanent positions to all vocational trainees and apprentices at the company, as well as a deal that offered temporary employees wages above the standard rate in the automotive industry. In these negotiations, the two sides are about as far apart as it's possible to be, I think. The union is proposing a 7% raise over the next 12 months, plus the equivalent of almost $200 a month for new trainees. They are also looking for something similar to that job guarantee to be reinstated to ensure that German workers don't get laid off. Meanwhile, the company wants to, quote, restructure, unquote, to remain competitive, and has said that they are interested in shutting down at least one and maybe two of their German factories. That would be the first time that they've done that in Germany in the company's 87-year history. This with the goal of saving 10 billion euros so that they can reach their earnings goal of 6.5%. Apparently, there are real concerns about the long-term competitiveness and profitability of the company, and IG Metall has recognized a need for change. They said in a statement that they would be open to some changes and concessions like, for instance, a 4-day work week, but that plant closures and job losses are a red line. Negotiations are scheduled to begin on September 25th. This ahead of schedule. They are originally only scheduled to begin in October, but the union requested early negotiations. The current contract expires on October 29th, and if there is no agreement, IG Metall said that they may have to strike the company in Germany. Volkswagen's global profitability concerns are obviously bad news for the UAW in the United States as well. The union finally organized after years of trying the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they are just starting contract negotiations. The UAW needs to be able to get a strong contract, a win, to continue their momentum, and so that they don't lose credibility. If Volkswagen is unable or unwilling to give workers in Chattanooga a strong first contract, that will be one more problem for the UAW as they seek to organize other non-union plants. Although, if they are able to, if they time the strike to sync up with a strike in Germany, it's possible they could have added leverage from the company's global troubles. So lots of stuff going on with Volkswagen. It all affects the UAW. Here's another quick update for our Huntsville listeners. There is a municipal runoff in District 1 on September 24th. So if you are in District 1 of Huntsville City, you have a runoff for City Council and for School Board on Tuesday, September 24th. For City Council, the candidates are Devin Keith and Michelle Watkins. For School Board, the candidates are Patricia King and Chandra Jones. The North Alabama Area Labor Council will be announcing endorsements this week, so make sure that you follow their Facebook page for more on that. The Labor Council did interview two of the four candidates. 3 of the 4 candidates responded to the Labor Council's questionnaires, and the Labor Council released highlights of those responses on their Facebook page that you can go and check right now on, again, the North Alabama Area Labor Council's Facebook page. You can check out highlights of the candidates Patricia King for school board, Michelle Watkins for city council, and Devin Keith for city council to see what commitments those candidates made to North Alabama's unions. The Labor Council did vote on endorsements last week, and again, we will be announcing those endorsements in the following week. So make sure that you're following us on Facebook. We're going to take a break really quick. We're going to be right back. We're going to take a look at what bosses were up to in the southern United States and respond to some of this anti-Haitian bigotry and, kind of knuckle-dragging stuff. So keep listening to the Valley Labor Report. We'll be right back.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show and the largest union radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you have anything to add, you can give us a call or send us a text. No, you can't send us a text. I'm sorry. I need to delete that. The service that we use removed that as an option some time ago. You can still give us a call, though. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. Again, the phone number is 844-899-8857. We have a great overtime lined up for you today. I wanted to go ahead and preview that really quick because that is the highlighted thing on our YouTube page. We're going to be interviewing a worker from Boeing in the Pacific Northwest who is now on strike along with 32,000 of his fellow workers. Unionized with the International Association of Machinists. And we'll also be talking to, at the same time, Jenny Brown from LaborNotes for a bigger contextual kind of understanding about what's going on over there in the Pacific Northwest. So it's obviously a very big story. That will be the largest strike. That is now the largest strike in the country at 32,000, jumping ahead of the AT&T strike in the South, which has some 17,000 people on strike. Also has huge ramifications, nationally, as Boeing is going, one of the main defense contractors for the United States and has been a primary supplier of commercial planes. So this comes amid all sorts of other trouble for Boeing, safety issues and the like.
Right.
And I don't imagine those safety and quality control issues are going to be made better by having management attempt to do production work for which they are not trained.
Probably not.
Yeah.
That probably not going to help.
I would imagine not. One of the articles that I read about the Boeing strike is that when they shut down temporarily for COVID, they took extensive precautions to try to protect the planes and make sure that everything was, everything was covered and protected from the environment and all that kind of stuff. And Boeing did not instruct the employees to do the same thing ahead of this strike. So they literally were on the line when the contract expired. They voted the contract down and they put their tools down as they told the company they would do. So it's not like this was a surprise as to when a strike would happen. Everybody knew when a strike would happen. The only thing that was a question was whether or not they would go on strike. But they very much did. 97% in favor of striking, only 95% in favor of rejecting the contract. So even though it wasn't, you couldn't, it wasn't known, you can't tell until the actual vote happens, but if 95% of people voted to reject the contract, as management, you've got to have some kind of feeling about that from the people. If you're at all connected to the shop floor, you got to have an idea that, oh yeah, they're going to reject this. I mean,
right.
That's like 1 in 20 people voted to accept the contract.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly a tight squeaker there at the end.
Yeah, no, it was not. It was overwhelmingly rejected, and but management did not direct the employees to take these sort of precautions that they did ahead of COVID. So so they just left. They just left the line. So interested in what exactly that's going to do as far as production losses. But
yeah, really big strikes on. I mean, between Boeing and AT&T, those are really big. Really
10,000 hotel workers also. went on strike over
Okay,
Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, so we've got, quite a few folks on strike right now. Just a friendly reminder, there are ways you can support striking workers. You can donate to strike funds. You can visit picket lines. Those of you in our listening areas, you're probably near a CWA picket line. There's AT&T workers all over the South, all over Alabama, Tennessee, Louisiana, Kentucky. So, if you are able to stop by a picket line, stop by, say hello, drop off waters, Gatorades, snacks, anything like that. Honk your horn as you drive by. That's always fun. Show some support that way. CWA does have a petition out that you can sign and share. And like I said, strike funds are available. And so, those are just some things you can do. Of course, don't cross a picket line, obviously. Don't want to do that. But, also just educating folks and getting the word out about these struggles and these strikes is really helpful because, often they're not covered in the media, or if they are covered in the media, it's with some, bias. So yeah, just telling people about these struggles, and that always inspires other workers, right? When you can see other folks who are willing to put it all out there and come together to collectively withhold your labor to win a better deal, to win better treatment, it's a big deal. It is a really big deal. That's a lot of workers. Over 30,000 at Boeing, over 17,000 at AT&T. So, like you said, over 10,000 at the hotels with Unite Here. So lots of big strikes happening in the country. It's still not like a historic level of striking. We have certainly seen a lot more striking in this country's history, but, maybe it is an indication that there is a lot of worker militancy out there and that workers are willing to stand up and fight back.
Speaking of not scabbing, we got a comment on our YouTube page yesterday that... since I remembered it, I want to read it. This is from user EndTheStrike665. So this guy must have either created a YouTube account specifically to go find coverage of the AT&T strike and comment negative things about it, or they changed their username again for that reason. So, kind of pathological strangeness going on here. But, let's listen to him. He says, quote, "This needs to stop. My father used to be a technician for AT&T, but he currently works at..." Sorry, I'm zooming in here. "My father used to be a technician for AT&T, but he currently works as a dispatcher for salesmen. Him, along with many other people, are being forced to stay in different parts of Florida, hours away from their home for 6 days a week to fill in for the technicians that are on strike. My father hasn't been able to spend more than 24 hours a week with his family, as well as not being able to go to church for about a month now. All because these idiots, the people going on strike, want, quote, better wages and benefits." Oh, that's he literally used the scare quotes there, right? And I just want to pause there and note how very funny it is to talk about oh no, I can't go to church because I'm busy scabbing. I'm busy scabbing, and now I'm going to cry about not being able to go to church. When they already have amazing wages and benefits. And I know that because theirs are way better than my father's. And even then, the wages and benefits that he has are great. But even then, the union is still protecting and paying these people for holding up signs, while my father and many others is being forced to stay in some hotel in some mountain hours away from his house without being able to spend even a day with his family or attend church. He's being deployed, as they're calling it, from Monday to Saturday as he drives hours to his house on Sunday mornings to spend that time with his family, just to drive all the way back that same night to do it all over again. And mind you, he's still getting paid his normal wage. All these people need to give up already or get fired because this is outrageous. So that's hilarious. That is a bonkers comment. And I responded with the level of respect that such a comment deserves, which is that I said, "Your father is a piece of crap scab. He should be ashamed. You should be ashamed. And maybe if he stops scabbing, he can get back in church and repent."
I'm going to pray for this brother.
Yes.
I'm going to pray and pray that he sees the light and sees the error of his ways. That is hilarious. Yeah. The idea that you're being forced to be a strike breaker. You are being forced. And apparently you're doing it for less wages than the people you're fighting against. What? You're that, like, you're willing to sell yourself out like that cheaply? I mean, what kind of
self-respect at least?
Some standards.
Yeah, typically scabs get like a premium for scabbing, but this, like,
there's like an understanding that you're doing something kind of wrong, and you therefore like get a little extra for that, right? Like to soothe your soul, they try to buy it, buy away the sins, and so that is wild. You should be really embarrassed. I would be ashamed.
Yes.
I would be ashamed if that was my father. I would certainly be ashamed if you were my son. But, thanks for sharing that with us. I really do appreciate it. I look forward to sharing that with as many CWA folks as I can find. I think they'll get a big kick out of that. It'll probably lift morale. So thank you for that. Please keep those stories coming.
Keep the stories coming.
We would love to get regular updates. How's your dad doing? How
is Dad the Scab doing this week? Give us an update on Dad the Scab. Yeah. No, he for sure needs to be in, this guy very clearly needs to be in church so that he has an avenue to repentance. But it is, he can just stop scabbing and then he can go to church.
Oh, what is it they always say? You could just quit and find a better job?
Exactly. Oh, my God. Exactly.
I was told, like, you're not allowed to complain about work. You're only allowed to just quit and find a better job.
That's right.
So
if Dad the Scab hates scabbing so much, he could just get a different job where he's not a scab.
Right. Has Dad the Scab talked to HR about these problems? I'm sure, because it's a big family, I'm sure HR would love to hear the complaints.
Yes.
And would take them very seriously and would be very concerned and treat you just like family. And so, good luck and keep us posted on how this journey unfolds. We'll keep sharing it with our folks as well. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, this Haitian stuff, right? This has been pretty crazy. Some of this, stuff that's being said about Haitian migrants who are here legally, right? I mean, that's really important to kind of foreground, because I have always been told, consistently over the years that no, I'm not racist. I just value the law. And I value the border. If people come here legally, then I'm totally fine with that. And I love immigrants, actually. I love immigrants and I love immigration. It should just be done legally. That's the thing that I care about. There's no, weird racial kind of animus or resentment going on with me. No, sir. I just want it to be legal. Well, these Haitian migrants are legal, right? And another thing that they say about this, it's undocumented. These people are illegals in other contexts, is that if you don't like the law, you should change the law, but right now, the law is such that these people are undocumented, and so there it is. And so I have to be opposed to it because it's against the law, right? But if it was legal, then I wouldn't care about it, right? Is what I'm always told consistently by everybody. And well, these Haitian immigrants are legal. They're legal. They're here under temporary protected status, legally, with full knowledge of the government because of the stuff that's going on in Haiti, which it is also worth noting is largely derivative of the assault on Haiti by America and Western governments, dating back to the Haitian Revolution, where the Haitian population threw off the yoke of their French colonizers, and then were subsequently made to pay reparations to the French for freeing themselves as slaves, right? Let's remember that. And they were paying that debt for freeing themselves. The Haitian slaves had to pay a debt to their slavers and colonizers for reparations For how long did they have to pay that? Are they still paying it? I don't know. It was like an absurd amount of time. Somebody's got to look that up. But it was crazy, right? And then even subsequent to that, there was still consistent, pressure put on the country of Haiti and people installed to rule over them.
Multiple military interventions.
The Clintons opposing minimum wage increases so that American companies can reap higher profits from the labor of Haitians. I mean, it's just there's a lot of derivative stuff going on here in Haiti that is the fault of the United States. And so, that's another wrinkle in the story that people should really be aware
and people
of.
don't talk about that enough when it comes to immigration more broadly. Like, why are there so many refugees coming to the United States? Why are there so many, migrants, whether it's, quote unquote, legally or not? Why are there so many desperate people fleeing to this country? And we don't really talk about those factors that are pushing people out of their country, and a lot of that does tie back into imperialist policies of the United States and our allies over the course of over a century, over 2 centuries in the case of Haiti. You're exactly right. I mean, when governments have been overthrown, when you've had multiple military interventions, civil wars, you name it, a lot of these people that are fleeing to this country are coming from countries that have been sabotaged in the name of greed, in the name of power, geopolitical influence, Western corporations and multinational corporations and their profits, from Guatemala to Haiti, to Bolivia, and on and on and on. And so, we don't talk about that a lot in this country. And, I think that is something that is unfortunate because me personally, I've always been curious about that, right? Like, I think it should be something we ask. Why would people feel like they have to pick up and leave their home? Like, it's hard to just leave. It's hard to leave your home and move to the next county over.
Right.
Like, that's no easy thing to do for a typical family, to move from one city to another. But to pick up and move, across the continent, to move across, the hemisphere, to do so, like, with, almost nothing but the shirt on your back and to, go across dangerous terrain, dealing with dangerous people, to risk all that, why would someone risk that?
Exactly. And, so I did look it up. It took until 1947 to pay off debts and the associated interest to the National City Bank of New York that stemmed from the 1792 Revolution, where the Haitians freed themselves from slavery from the French. Bonkers. So, those are all things to kind of have in the background as we talk about this. And so here is from the debate where former President Trump, circulated some of these completely baseless claims, at the very least, putting it the most charitably at the time of recording and at the time that he said this. There was no verification of any of these claims. So let's play this clip from the debate.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame.
And, it sounds very funny, obviously. Kamala Harris laughed at it. And the cadence with which Trump speaks is always just very funny. He's a very funny speaker. And if you ever, it's an exercise worth doing to just take a random paragraph from a Trump speech and just read it out loud in your own voice without his weird cadence, because it's totally disconnected and kind of not something that most people would consider a complete sentence or thought or anything, approaching reason or rationality. But so that was funny, and some people have had fun with it. And here's one of those remixes that I found on Twitter.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the dogs. And this is what's happening. Dogs. People on television.
There have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food.
So there you go. It's kind of funny, right? It's a silly thing to be saying without evidence. And one of the tweets that J.D. Vance put out in response to some of the backlash against his claims was that I'm hearing firsthand reports of people who say their neighbors' pets were abducted. And that's not a firsthand report. That's not what that means at all. Actually, that's what we call a second or third hand report, right? If something has not happened to you, you saw it happen to somebody else, and then you report seeing something happen to another person, right? I mean, we're a few kind of vectors removed from the original thing that's supposed to have happened. And if people's pets were actually being abducted, you would think that they would be the ones calling the police, not their neighbors, right? I mean, I don't keep tabs on my neighbor's cat, right? If my neighbor's cat disappeared, I would have no idea at all. I would just not notice it, right? And that's kind of the typical relationship. I mean, unless there's a really strong relationship between you and your neighbor's cat, you're not really going to notice it for a while if something happens to it and it dies or it disappears or something like that, right? So the neighbor being the ones to report the quote-unquote abducted animals is just not super credible. And like I said, if my dog were abducted, I would be reporting that to animal services or to the police or something like that. And the police have said they have received no reports from citizens claiming that they have had their pets abducted. So, that's kind of makes it not credible what's been going on here. And this stuff has been used to dehumanize, the entire Haitian community. And some people are going to come back, and there's two instances in particular that people refer to when you hear things like, oh, that didn't happen. And one is there was a black woman, not in Springfield, but in a different town in Ohio, that had a mental health episode and did kill a neighbor's cat and was eating it in their driveway. But this was not a Haitian immigrant. This was not even an immigrant at all. This was a U.S. citizen who has voted and been here her whole life, not Haitian, right? And just somebody who had a mental health episode, but because they were black, they said the Haitians are doing it. And then there was this picture going around of a black man carrying a goose. And no other context to that, right? No way to identify this person as Haitian. No way to identify that this goose was abducted from the park and not hunted like is totally normal and people do, right? So, those are the only two actual concrete kind of things that people point to. And they're just not they're not related, they're not credible, and things like that. So, And they've been used to dehumanize Haitians, and this has had an effect on people. From the Haitian Times, aside from the anxiety caused by Tuesday night's debate, the woman, a Haitian, also said her cars have been vandalized twice in the middle of the night. She woke up one morning to broken windows and another to acid thrown on her vehicle. She's added cameras to her driveway and tried to report the incidents to police, to no avail. I'm going to have to move because this area is no longer good for me, she said. I can't even leave my house to go to Walmart. I'm anxious and scared. Another incident reported by The Hill, the bomb threat that resulted in the evacuation of the Springfield City Hall in Ohio on Thursday used harmful language against the city's immigrant community, aligning with recent false claims touted by Republicans, including former President Trump. Springfield Mayor Rob Rue told the Washington Post that the threat used hateful language towards immigrants and the Haitians in our community. These are real, specific incidents that have been reported and verified by the authorities. And it's worth noting that nobody is saying, oh, every white person is racist now. Every white person is randomly being violent towards Haitians and black people. That's not happening, despite the fact that these incidents that are uncorroborated, unsubstantiated, or totally unrelated to the Haitian community are being painted, used against the entire Haitian community. And then there was one boy who was killed in a car crash that involved a Haitian man that's been used to spread hate, despite his parents literally begging people to stop using his name to attack people, to spread hatred, right? And then amid all this isn't really related, but it is, it's something that I saw that was just super crazy. Amid all this, there's also been the standard kind of anti-black, anti-Muslim bigotry of the knuckle-dragging sort, with the owner and publisher of a major newspaper in Alabama agreeing with criticism of CNN for, get this, interviewing Ilhan Omar on 9/11. Not about 9/11. Nowhere in the interview did Ilhan Omar, obviously, she did not say anything positive about the events of 9/11. It was not even discussed in her interview. And again, even if they got comment from this Muslim woman about how the aftermath of 9/11 has affected the Muslim community, that would not be an issue, and that is something that is worth reporting around 9/11. This owner and publisher of a major newspaper in Alabama agreeing with the fact that CNN just had a Muslim woman on TV on September 11th. I mean, that is just really knuckle-dragging, bigoted, stupid, careless, hateful kind of stuff, right? But I do want to say that that's not all that's out there. That's not the only thing that's motivating anti-immigrant emotions among the American public. As a New York LIUNA steward wrote for LaborNotes, he said, we can't simply brush off concerns by blaming them all on Trump's scaremongering. We have to acknowledge that people have legitimate worries about their family's safety, their city's meager public services, and their own bargaining power for better wages. And that is actually worth combating and addressing. And so to specifically, although briefly, speak to some of those real economic concerns that are certainly out there, I wanted to pull some other parts of that article and share with y'all. The big thesis of this piece is that even when you disagree with somebody and disagree strongly, it's still important and necessary, and especially as a unionist, and Adam and I know this as unionists in the Deep South, it's important to have these conversations with and be able to build relationships with people that you disagree with. And he opens the article with an example of a Trump-supporting union member who he regularly argues with about politics, right? He has a relationship with this fellow, but who stood up for him, who, it's also worth noting, the author of the article is an undocumented immigrant himself. And so this Trump-supporting union member stood up for this undocumented immigrant union steward in the face of an attack from another worker who accused the steward of not looking out for the company's profitability. And so the Trump-supporting union member stood up for him because he knows the role of the steward, which is, yes, to prioritize the well-being of the workers, not production. Managers have to prioritize production, not stewards. That's not our role. And I actually have a similar story. You know, basically my whole family is conservative and none of them have been in union members except for one. And that one uncle who has been in a union, even though he's still very much a Trump supporter, and he ribbed me about, quote unquote, being a Democrat or whatever not long ago. He's told me stories about his days as a steward at UPS, protecting workers and enforcing the contract, including, yes, at times at the expense of production and efficiency. And so, people can get stuff like that. The author then talks about another instance where the union was engaged in a battle with developers. I'm going to recount that in full. So this is the author speaking. I began a conversation with this brother before one of the rallies during the, quote, the hashtag Count Me In campaign in Hudson Yards, a major struggle in New York City from 2017 to 2019 over whether the largest real estate construction project in U.S. history would be built entirely with union labor. The conversation touched on how the non-union companies had brought immigrant workers to work on the project. Some union workers thought we should call immigration on them. I told them that I didn't think that was the solution. The correct approach was to organize them. We should think of immigrant workers not as a threat to our job, but as future members of our union. It's in the union's interest that all workers doing the same kind of work be organized and united. It's in the boss's interest to throw up obstacles and make solidarity look impossible and keep us disorganized and divided. The worker replied that before helping immigrant workers, we should attend to the interests of Americans first. I pointed out an obvious contradiction, that I, as an undocumented immigrant union laborer, was standing with him against a big developer who was taking away our work, and the developer was an American citizen like him. This was a class struggle. And solidarity among workers mattered more than his shared nationality with the developer. And so and this is me speaking again, you have more in common with the undocumented immigrant or the documented Haitian, again, it's important to emphasize that, than you do with the billionaires and the big employers. And that's a line that I genuinely believe. I said that once on Dale's show, and he asked me who the most popular pop star in Haiti was. And when obviously I didn't know, I don't follow Haitian pop culture, he kind of smugly, laughed as if he had refuted my statement, but that's exactly... That thinking gets exactly at the issue, right? He's thinking culturally, that I don't listen to the same artists as Haitians, which is true, but that's not material. I am much more economically close to the Haitian migrant than I am to Jeff Bezos, right? Even though I do well, I make good money, I am not poor. If you give me 3 bad months, 3 months of unemployment, I could very well lose my house, right? That's the kind of thing that we, as workers, as unionists, when we say that you have more in common with immigrants than with Elon Musk, that's what we mean. And that's true. I've got a little bit more to say, but it's going to have to wait till the second half of the program. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Just a reminder, folks, make sure you stay tuned. Find us on Facebook and YouTube. We're going to be talking to a worker from Boeing about the strike in the Pacific Northwest and what it means for the rest of the country. We're also going to be talking about restaurant unions. We're going to be talking about a potential longshore strike, including right here in Alabama. Talking about Amazon Teamsters raising working conditions and wages for non-unionized Amazon workers and more. So make sure you find us. Facebook, YouTube, The Valley Labor Report. Adam, what have you got plug-wise this week?
Go to labornotes.org/events. There's some free trainings on September 18th. They have democratic rights for union members. On October 1st, they have what to do when your union breaks your heart. Speaking of Labor Notes, registration is live for the Alabama Troublemaker School on Saturday, October 19th in Birmingham. Don't want to miss that. So again, go to labornotes.org/events. On Saturday, September 28th, Alabama Rise is hosting its annual meeting. So that's open to all the members as well as delegates and member groups where members will shape the upcoming year's legislative agenda. If you want to participate, you can do that in Montgomery, live via Zoom, or you can watch the recordings later and vote electronically. Go to alarise.org for more. Don't forget to vote in the District 1 runoff election. That is Tuesday, September 24th. If you live in Huntsville, Again, check out the North Alabama Area Labor Council's Facebook page for more information about that, including upcoming announcements about our endorsement.
844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857 if you want to call in during the second half of the program. We're going to take a break really quick. If you don't follow us to the second half of the program, we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next week.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party age player. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party age player. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
Folks, welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with Adam Keller. We are now in the second half of the program, which we call Overtime. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Give us a 5-star rating if you're listening to us on a podcasting app. Like the stream if you haven't yet. Subscribe to the channel. All that good stuff. Brandon says, good morning, TVLR, in solidarity with all workers on strike right now. Indeed, indeed. Jacob Jones says, it's funny, but there is a not insignificant chance that this results in someone or multiple someone's being hurt or killed. There's already been death threats, indeed, talking about the Haitian stuff. And yeah, so I wanted to continue with this, and then Adam had some thoughts as well. So 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. And that's good. We're going to be bringing them on at noon. So, continuing reading this article from LaborNotes, from a LIUNA steward, an undocumented union member. He says, we can't simply brush off concerns by blaming them all on Trump's scaremongering. We have to acknowledge that people have legitimate worries about their family's safety, their city's meager public services, and their own bargaining power for better wages. But we must also express that there's more than one way to solve these problems. The MAGA approach of criminalizing immigrants and supporting massive raids on job sites will not only terrorize our communities, but also break apart any chance of working class solidarity. When overexploited immigrants are outcompeting other workers, the union approach should be to support these immigrants in organizing on the job. A Biden administration policy called Deferred Action for Labor Enforcement offers a work permit and protection from deportation to workers willing to testify against a company that has committed labor or safety violations. DALE, which is the acronym, is the cornerstone of the organizing approach my union is pursuing in its campaign at body shops. It's a worker-centered approach that protects workers while going after bad employers. Organizing can not only protect immigrants and integrate them better into working-class communities, but also make the union movement the backbone of the immigrant movement. My union, LIUNA, Local 78, a union of asbestos removal workers, was founded in 1996 by immigrants. When our first contract was signed, the news was read in English, to little fanfare, then in Spanish, to which half the room exploded in cheers, and then in Polish, to which the other half of the room exploded in cheers. Our local is infused with the culture and attitudes of immigrant communities. This is a consequence of the right organizing approach, seeking to bring all the workers doing this particular work into the same union. Many of the concerns I hear about immigrants and asylum seekers are based in misinformation, and I could spend a lot of time countering these assertions with facts. I could point out that undocumented immigrants contribute $1 billion in tax revenue in 6 states alone. I could say that the $1.6 billion that New York City spent on services for asylum seekers last year went to nonprofit emergency shelter agencies, many of which lack appropriate sanitary facilities like showers or toilets, hardly 5-star hotels. I could argue that politicians are scapegoating immigrants for their own bad policies. I could also spend a good part of my 30-minute lunch break breaking down how wars, climate disasters, sanctions, and social instability have caused the recent wave of immigration that we are seeing. But I think such efforts would be futile. The social discontent that fuels MAGA is not based on specific disagreements over policy. The problem is not that people are uninformed. The problem is that people feel alienated by their work and powerless to change things in their community. That's why they are angry at the thought of someone else getting help. MAGA is built on sentiments meant to divide us. It offers a very narrow definition of what is normal or acceptable and blames every problem on outsiders or people who are different. But solidarity and diversity have always made the union movement strong. Combating Trump can't only be done by arguing facts with people. You have to practice solidarity at the work site and be the example of how a good unionist thinks and acts. In the workplace, rather than combat it by moralizing, which is what MAGA itself does, we should combat it by reminding our coworkers of the mutual toil, respect, and struggle that unites us as working people. We do this by being good coworkers, respectful debaters, and overall, committed unionists. And if the threat of fascism does materialize, the groundwork laid in our job sites may be crucial to inspiring and mobilizing workers to come out and confront it. So that was a really good article, and I only read like half of it, so there is some more stuff. I didn't want to read the whole thing. I want to encourage you to go out and read it yourself. It is a really, really good piece by a union member in New York called "Worker Solidarity is the Best Strategy to Defeat Rising Fascism." And a lot of really good stuff there, and the things that people point to as these economic concerns can absolutely be fought by organizing. The extent to which wages are depressed and things like this by undocumented immigrants, it is overstated, but I don't think it's non-existent. I just don't believe that. I don't think it's intuitive, and the studies that I've seen do show a small, like 2 to 3% decrease in wages from in related industries in a geographic area from an influx in undocumented immigration. And so that's not unintuitive to me. That makes some amount of sense. But the amount that you get from unionizing, the wage premium that you get from unionizing, is something like 10 to 14% when you account for all of the, you make sure that everybody's that you're comparing like to like, right? And that is clearly, right, 10 to 14% is clearly very much higher than 2 to 3%. So this downward pressure that bosses exert on undocumented immigrants, right? Because it's not as if undocumented immigrants or immigrants generally come to the United States and they come to employers and say, hey, I see that you are offering this person $30 an hour. I'll only do it, like affirmatively coming and saying, I'll do it for $20 an hour. Please only pay me $20 an hour. No, that's not what happens. An employer puts a position out there that is only $20 an hour or only $15 or only $10 an hour as opposed to 20 or 30. And then an undocumented immigrant or a migrant of some other sort might take it more readily than somebody else would. But the migrants are not setting the wages, right? That's another important thing to remember. It's the bosses that are setting the wages, and unionization can combat whatever downward pressure does exist from increased migration. So I thought it was a really good piece. I really recommend checking it out. And yeah, it's just been really frustrating seeing this stuff going on in this country. Really, the author, kind of recommends against the kind of moralizing stuff, but it is difficult, especially when it is as explicit as it has been in the last week. It is kind of difficult to refrain totally from moralizing because it is so morally repugnant, some of the stuff that's been said about these communities. But yeah, Adam, I'm interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think you're right about this LaborNotes article. I really enjoyed it and appreciated that perspective, and I think it's very helpful. I think it is morally repugnant, and as Jacob pointed out in the chat, it's ridiculous, and so on some level, you laugh at it because it is so ridiculous, like it's clearly detached from reality, but it absolutely is resulting in real harm to people, and already has resulted in harm to people, and could result in more harm to people, and it's deliberate, and it's this is not a new idea. People have been using these sort of tactics for a very long time to divide and conquer folks. Scapegoating is a tried and true political strategy. Yeah. And you try to construct a them that is very threatening, that you blame for all of society's problems, real or imagined. And then there's the us, right? Whoever's defined as us, who's, the virtuous in need of protection. And you've got this us versus them framing going on, and that can generate anger and outrage and fear, and you can stoke that, and ultimately that helps, can create permission for people to commit violence and discrimination. I think this sort of language really, it feeds into real material impacts on folks. And, marginalized folks is, usually the most marginalized folks that are going to be, the victims of this kind of scapegoating. And whether it's to, mobilize your political base or to try to legitimize violence, to try to win elections, whatever it's about, it's something that we have to be mindful of and we have to watch out for, and we as working people can't fall for these tricks. I think that's really what is important to me, is we can't let our class be divided, right? Gender, religion, ethnicity, immigration status, education background. At the end of the day, the vast majority of people, whether you're in Alabama, you're in Kentucky, Louisiana, wherever you're listening from, the vast majority of us are working class. We don't have anything to sell but our labor. That's how we make a living, right? As off of wages, salaries. We have to sell our labor power in order to survive. And ultimately, we're the majority. And so that's our mission, is to actually unite as a majority and recognize that ultimately it's our labor that spins the wheels. Like, our economy, our society, it's powered by us. And we have more in common with each other, as you pointed out earlier. We have more in common with each other despite some real differences. Yeah. Particularly there are cultural differences. Sure. That's true. But we have more in common with each other on a material basis than we do with, the politicians and the bosses. So I think it's really important, folks who recognize that already, to not fall for these tricks, but also to try to have those relationships and those conversations like the LaborNotes article was talking about. And try to move people in the right direction. Try to get people to not fall for the scapegoating, and to recognize our shared humanity. Because ultimately that's, what's often missed with this, and how this kind of crap can work, is because people aren't recognizing our shared humanity. And the dehumanization starts to play a role and really gather steam and gather momentum in people's heads, and it's really scary. So, and I think that's also part of why it's important to get messaging out there that is about solidarity over bigotry, because that is really the only way we fight back is with solidarity, with being willing to fight for people, including people you don't really look like, people that don't talk like you, people you maybe not even understand their situation. You may not be able to relate very well to their situation. You may not even totally agree with them or what they do. But at the end of the day, we have to have each other's back. Because the vast majority of us, we are all getting screwed. We, as working class people, have been falling behind for decades. And the more they're able to divide and conquer us and get, documented versus undocumented, gay versus straight, white versus black, the more they divide and conquer, the weaker we all are. That is historically how it's always worked. And, folks will keep on playing those games as long as they do work. And, it's unfortunate that, there are a lot of working class people who fall for it. But, I think at the end of the day, a lot of working class people are up for grabs. I think a lot of working class people are not necessarily committed to the hard right or necessarily committed to much of anything right now. And I think it's our job as labor militants, as people who kind of recognize these games that are being played and see our shared struggle and what we have in common. It's our job to go out there and educate folks and build those relationships and bring people together, get diverse people together, working together, fighting the same fights together. I think that can make a real difference when people go on strike together, when people protest together, when people picket together, when they rally at the school board together. Those sort of things do make a difference and, build relationships and shared struggle. And that can help overcome some of these issues and, fight back against some of the propaganda. Because that's the other piece of it. Like, yeah, you have the politicians who are spouting this nonsense, but you have an entire ecosystem of propaganda that pumps out nonsense to people's brains every single day, all day, just like intellectual poison being pumped out there, polluting, our atmosphere. So yeah, those were some of my thoughts about it. I definitely appreciate that article, and I've been really, disturbed to see some of the fear and the scapegoating and these sort of tactics come up, including here in Alabama. There's been disruptions at the Albertville City Council, Athens City Council, right? Controversies around migrants who are working at a chicken processing plant. And it's disturbing. It's disturbing. And so we all have a responsibility to fight back in terms of solidarity, show folks solidarity, really demonstrate how that is the best path forward, not bigotry. That will not solve our problems. It will not fix anything. It will just make our problems worse.
Yeah, exactly. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. So there was this piece that I saw on Twitter that I wanted to respond to because it was about restaurants and unions. And, I don't talk about it a lot, but I worked in a restaurant for 3 years, and I have something of a soft spot for workers in that industry because I think that they are particularly exploited and the conditions that they have to face are particularly gross. And it's, people always think about restaurants and service work as like, oh, this is a job that teenagers can, that children can do, that 14-year-olds and 13-year-olds and 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds should be able to do, right? That's kind of when you think of a job for children, you often think of restaurants and service. Despite the fact, and this is a fact, that there is no other industry in the country, none, with a higher incidence of sexual harassment. So, I worked there when I was young. I worked there when I was 18. I was legally an adult, but there were people there that worked younger than me. And it's, generally most of the time it probably will be fine, but it's something that if you have worked in the restaurant industry for any length of time, if you have not been sexually assaulted, you know somebody that has, right? You know somebody that has gone through something like this. And so obviously restaurant workers make just pitiful amounts of money. They do not make nearly enough for as hard as they work. And I think they deserve more. I think they deserve a lot more. But that is not a universally held opinion, apparently. There's a movement underway in the Twin Cities in Minnesota to organize restaurants by Unite Here. And that's the trigger for this article by a fellow named Adam Platt. His name is Adam Platt. He is the executive editor of a fancy business magazine, who vigorously insists in his communications with me that he is not anti-union, but nevertheless has thoughts. I'm not anti-union, but I have thoughts. And so he opens the article by saying that, and the article is titled, if you really want to read it, Restaurants versus Unions and the City. He opens the article by saying that his soon-to-come take is informed by, quote, conversations across industry, government, and organized labor to understand what's going on. And he reiterates that all of what follows come from people at the center of these universes. And so that really makes you think that, oh, this guy has a real thumb on the pulse, right, of what's going on in the restaurant sector, including among people in unions and people who have voted for unions. And so you got to think like, wow, this guy really is going to know his stuff, and he's really going to represent both sides of the argument very charitably and make sure that everybody's represented well. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler warning before I jump right into it and say that although you will get a pretty extensive quote from one business owner alongside hand-wringing that other restaurant owners don't want to talk because they're afraid of their employees, no worker who you will notice in his telling is some big, powerful entity in the Twin Cities, the big, powerful, big restaurant worker is quoted or even so much as paraphrased, right? He presents some of his opinions as basically something that, this is what the restaurant owners would say if they weren't so scared of their workers. But there's not even an attempt. There's no attempt to relay to the reader the reasons that restaurant workers say they are organizing. He will make some prognostications about why the unions are interested in organizing. He talks, and basically it's kind of the stuff that you're going to hear a lot actually in anti-union talking points. The only reason they're organizing is to get more dues payers because they're losing members in other sectors of the industry. They just want more dues payers. It's about keeping business up as a union. It's not that people are coming to them wanting to organize, and it's certainly not that workers in the industry are independently interested in having a voice on the job. That can't be it. And so he doesn't even kind of attempt to, there's no quote or paraphrase from a worker, even from a press release where a worker is quoted, right? No attempt to represent the workers who voted in favor of unionizing. They just don't exist in his telling of the story. And it's very frustrating to me. It's very frustrating. And I mentioned that he's had communications with me because I invited him on the show to talk about this. And he said, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically like, again, he does this stuff like, I'm not anti-union and I don't want to be set up as a capitalist foil or whatever, on behalf of business. I have my opinions and I'll, and they are what they are. But if you want like a capitalist foil or whatever, you should talk to a business owner. And it's like, I just want to talk to you about the words that you put on the table, right? I mean, and if you think that makes you look like a capitalist foil, then maybe that should encourage you to do some introspection. But, so I say, I'm very upfront with him. I don't, and if I had been less upfront with him, I could have gotten him on the show and it would have been an entertaining segment. But I do want to be honest. I don't want to lie. I don't want to lie, in public or in private, to people. So I didn't. And I told him that, I would expect the conversation to be adversarial. And I told him explicitly, quote, in my email, I question the extent to which you've engaged in good faith with the position of organizing workers. I did say that, of course, I'll give you opportunities to talk. I gave him some clips of some other like debates that we've done. But yeah, he said I'm going to decline. You really need somebody from the business or hospitality community to represent that perspective, not me, and I don't really want to occupy that role. He said our magazine is produced for and subscribed to by a business audience, not a general audience or a social justice audience. I wrote the column with my audience in mind, and I feel I was fair to unite here. I do not. And again, there he is. He says I was fair to unite here. Again, no mention of the workers. He's third-partying the union. It's as if the people organizing are just being, marionetted by Unite Here, this outside entity, right? But did not go out of my way to articulate the union perspective. That much is clear for sure. And I'm not interested in justifying to you or an audience how I structured my story or whether it was fair to either side. I have restaurateurs mad at me about it as well, I might add. That is an interesting claim. I'm going to press X to doubt on that one. And, he goes on to say, maybe it's different in Alabama. Maybe workers here in Minnesota are just like super well compensated and you don't understand what it's like, basically. So, So yeah, there you go. That was my conversation with him. Unfortunately, he's not willing to, represent. He's not willing to defend his takes, and so that's unfortunate. But that is what it is. So here we go. Here's his article. Parts of his. I'm obviously not going to read the whole thing. If you really want to read the whole thing, you can go read it yourself. But I wanted to pull out some of the things that I took issue with. Unions represent a small minority of American workers. their offerings have typically held little allure in restaurants, which have high turnover and mostly short-term part-time workers interested in maximizing tips and minimizing hours. Restaurant work has been an invaluable haven for people earning money to fund a transition to an adult career, but the industry supports career track jobs as well in management or tip roles at high-end restaurants. And so just here, unions' offerings have typically held little allure in restaurants, which have a high turnover and mostly short-term part-time workers interested in maximizing tips and minimizing hours. And, I don't know what he thinks the dynamics are in other industries, but the dynamic of wanting more money for less work is like the kind of quintessential working class demand, right? That's that's like literally the whole entire thing is that workers want more money for less work and employers want more work for less money. Like that's the whole literal class divide. And that doesn't change just because these workers, it doesn't change the dynamic because most of their wages are coming from tips rather than wages. And so that's kind of a perplexing supporting argument for saying that, restaurant workers don't want or deserve or need unions. It's very strange. As opposed to maybe considering the idea that, workers in restaurants in the United States are not unionized because of the kind of severe repression of organized labor and the lack of, legal support for workers who want to engage in organization and the lack of protections against retaliation for stuff like that. No, it's just because independently themselves, the workers have decided, again, that they don't want like a steady income. They don't want regular hours. They don't want job security. They don't want to say they're just totally not interested in that. They're interested in maximizing tips and minimizing hours, which is completely different from every other worker. He says Unite Here has set its sights on creating more full-time restaurant jobs by attacking the long-held practice of flexible scheduling. Efforts to unionize one of the restaurants. He quotes some of the restaurants' attempts to unionize that have been successful, some unsuccessful. And in response, owners are lawyering up, spending $1,000 an hour on specialists who promise to keep Local 17 at bay. And, here again, it seems like here's an opportunity for introspection because later on in the article, he's going to do the whole woe is me, like, this restaurant closed after it unionized because of the union. And there's even more complications to that as well. These poor restaurants are not making enough money, but they have enough money to pay $1,000 an hour to these specialists. I mean, that could fund like 30 people an hour, right? I mean, that's crazy. That's just a absurd, crazy amount of money that they're spending on keeping the union at bay. And when they could just spend that on paying people more or making the schedule more, tending to the demands of the workers. Instead, they want to spend this money so that they retain their power over these workers. He says the industry attracts a front-of-house workforce that values the ability to work as much or as little as they choose and to take lots of time off to pursue passion projects or education. And so, here again, I don't want to discount the idea that there are going to be differences in industries across regions, right? Or even in different sectors of an industry within a region. But, the idea that that most restaurant workers can just take off as much as they choose, right? For any reason. That's was not exactly my experience. My experience was that if you were not able to work and you couldn't get your shift covered, then you either had to go into work or you would risk discipline and ultimately termination for that, right? And also, the restaurant that I worked at for 3 years, I worked at when I was 18 years old, and I was the only person in this restaurant who was not paying rent, right? That was a kind of crazy dynamic to me because this was not a high-end restaurant that I was working at. It was just a middle-of-the-road burger joint, fast casual kind of stuff. And everybody that worked there besides me was having to pay rent. So I'm sure that they would have valued a steady income. So here again, he's just making strange arguments, and that just not engaging with the workers, with their perspective. Here's another one. Ask a tipped restaurant employee if they would rather stick out a slow shift at minimum wage or get cut. The uniform answer is get cut. Obviously, that's my word. This reality makes union heads explode. But I've been asking this question of restaurant workers all year. The frustrated workers that Local 17 channels in its PR and friendly media coverage are outliers, people who have chosen the wrong kind of job for their needs. And so, I wish that he had a quote here to justify this statement that union organizers and activists and supporters are just totally bumfuzzled by the idea that a minimum wage worker would rather get cut than stay on through a slow shift in an industry where the majority of their wages are coming from tips. It's like, what union person is like... Who doesn't understand that dynamic? I mean, this crazy. I really wish he had a quote. I mean, maybe there's one there's all sorts of people out there, so maybe there's one person, but I really wish we had a quote for this because that's kind of a obvious dynamic, right? Who doesn't understand that? So here's another one. Kim's was losing money. Kim's was a restaurant. Kim's was losing money before it unionized and just announced it is going out of business at the end of August. Did Local 17 believe more rigidity and overhead would fix the problems of an exceptional restaurant trying to make it in a deserted commercial neighborhood? I mean, really, this restaurant, really entrepreneurial spirit kind of stuff here, really trying to make it, we're trying really hard, this kind of stuff. And just the poor entrepreneur or business owner, their workers are just forcing more rigidity and overhead, and so what does that communicate to you, Adam, when you read this? When you say, did Local 17 believe more rigidity and overhead would fix the problems? What does that kind of imply to you?
Well, I would assume that Local 17 enforced some rigidity and overhead.
Right. Like as if there was a contract in place or something, right?
Yeah, that was very rigid. And somehow increased costs.
Yeah, and had higher wages for people. Or maybe something like this, right? That's kind of the implication that I got, too. And so I was like, oh, man, that's interesting. That's a bummer. But, sometimes these things happen. But, yeah, that's the implication. That's the kind of thought that you're left with in your head, that Local 17, they won a union election. They got a contract. They made things more rigid. And they increased overhead by increasing wages. And poor Kim's, they just couldn't cut it,
and that's what closed it.
And that's why it closed. He doesn't tell you that actually the union had not even had a chance to share their bargaining proposals. That's super interesting. So here from Workday Magazine, an outlet that's actually, kind of interested in, interviewing workers. The title of this article by Amy Stagger is called, quote, "I Know My Worth, What It Takes to Unionize the Service Industry." And they quote a worker. They say, quote, "Why did the company close Kim's before we'd even had a chance to share our bargaining proposals?" said Kim's back-of-house supervisor, Alice Calder, in a press release from Local 17. Quote, "If the closure isn't about busting the union or punishing union supporters, there's no excuse not to hire us at Young Johnny, Pizzeria Lola, or Hello Pizza, or put us on preferential hiring lists until spots comes up." Because Kim's is owned by a person that not only owns that one restaurant, but as you can tell, a suite of restaurants of all varieties. And so because they did, and so the dynamic here is that the union unionized, they won a union election, and they had not even begun bargaining. So literally nothing had changed yet before they closed. There was no increased rigidity. There was no increased overhead costs, no increased wages, nothing. They had just won a union election and had not even been able to begin bargaining yet. So because they are union, the company is going to have to bargain with them over the effects of the closures, and the union is going to be trying to get these people to get the company to hire them at some of their other restaurants when spots come up. But the restaurant is balking at this because very clearly, even if maybe it's possible the financials were not great, but clearly the primary motivator was union busting for closing the restaurant, right? That's very clear by their actions. So back to this anti-union piece. Kim's workers had demands that were typical of the era, less about traditional themes like wages and benefits than about guarantees and control. Guarantees and control are actually traditional themes. Yeah. Maybe this fancy-ass executive editor of a fancy-ass business journal should take the time to read one singular collective bargaining agreement, because guarantees and control are actually ubiquitous. They're almost universal, in fact. I'm having trouble thinking about a union contract that would not include some form of guarantees and control. Back to the piece. They don't like the inconsistency of income that rises and falls on the variables of business. They also increasingly want a role in the managing of the business. That means input on decisions like where the company sources milk, or whether pro-Palestine pins can be worn at work. Cafe Surrey's front of house workforce, the only cohort being organized, earns between $23 and $30 per hour with tips, and they pay 80% of health insurance premiums with a deductible. So, trying to make it seem like, because they make this amount of money in the Twin Cities, which has a much higher cost of living than Huntsville, they don't deserve a union, is kind of the implication there. So here's the one place where he does quote a business owner. And it's interesting that this is the place that this is the actual input that he does get from a business owner. And this is from a business owner that does have union restaurants in hotels. And this business owner says that the cost of doing business in his union restaurants are only marginally more expensive than in his non-union operations. That's interesting. He has not been pushed into fixed scheduling, but has rules about when employees can be cut during a shift. Not unreasonable. And his biggest frustration is that seniority controls the workplace because unions try to eliminate prerogatives of subjectivity. Again, not unreasonable. Graves says, the business owner, it's tough to reward high performers in a union environment, but suggests operators focus their energies on working with Local 17 rather than fighting it. So that's a pretty reasonable perspective from Mr. Business Owner right there. And so Mr. Fancy, executive editor of a fancy business journal, he closes out the piece by saying that unions serve a vital role in American life, but there's a difference between protecting people's dignity and attempting to impose a new model on a sector whose workers are already well compensated as unskilled labor goes. And to be clear, there are restaurants in town that offer career track jobs and fixed scheduling for those who want that. But not every job can or should be a career. And I think the question to ask there is why not? He says disaffected 20-somethings who will be in grad school next year do not have standing to tell the owner who the milk vendor or general manager would be, or to believe they are entitled to a career track job within walking distance of their home, all demands I've heard in the last few months. Workplace power and control come with experience and dedication, and the people who risk the most are reasonably entitled to make the decisions that affect a business's viability. And obviously, even in union workplaces, business owners have more of a say than workers. But yes, you should have to give up some amount of control over an enterprise if you have to hire other people, right? If you want total 100% control, do it totally 100% yourself. Do it yourself. If you got to have other people to do it, they deserve a say. Some amount of control. And the more people that you have to include in the operation of an enterprise to make the operation of your enterprise possible, the less power and control that you should have as an individual business owner. And so it's very good that these people are unionizing restaurants in the Twin Cities. Hope it continues in the Twin Cities, and I hope it expands. But yeah, people like this are very frustrating, especially when they're not willing to just come out and say, like, I am anti-union. Because all of this throat-clearing BS that he does is just BS. And you can tell from what he wrote, right? I mean, this is a guy that is very clearly has some sort of, he thinks the kids are uppity or whatever, and they don't deserve it. And
Right.
he should just be out about that and say that no, I don't believe in unions as a principle. I don't believe that workers deserve control or a voice on the job as a principle. Some workers I like, maybe if they have hard hats or they're big burly white guys, right? Maybe they deserve some amount of control, but that's just because I like these workers particularly. Like, they look nice to me. I like to look at them. They make me feel good, right? But these other workers who look weird, or some of them are women, or some of them are maybe like LGBT, some of them are people of color, I don't know. I feel weird around them. They seem kind of uppity. I don't think they deserve, so that's just kind of the way that I operate. I don't have a principle that people who work deserve some amount of control. These people, they make me feel good. These other people, they make me feel not good. So, the ones that make me feel good, they deserve stuff. The ones who don't, they don't. And that's how I work. And he should just be upfront about that.
Right. I've never understood people who feel like certain jobs should be less than other jobs.
Right.
And that's not to say that, like, starting tomorrow, everybody should get paid the exact same wage at every single job. I'm not trying to imply that right at this second. What I'm concerned about is that we have folks who think that, restaurant jobs should just be crappy jobs, right? With no benefits, crazy scheduling, dangerous conditions, hostile, abusive conditions, that those things are just, it's just part of the territory, right? Because that's this fellow's position really is, his rhetoric about, wrapping up the article with the pro-union stuff is more or less like you're saying that there are some workers he can see where maybe it makes sense for them, right? And I hear that talking point sometimes. People say, oh, well, maybe a union makes sense for those factory workers over there or for those construction workers over there, but not for these office workers or not for these restaurant workers or not for these nurses or these teachers or, insert category of workers here. And I've just, I don't understand those divisions because, if you've got a boss, if you don't own the place and you've got a boss, you're a worker and you should have a union. Like, unions are a tool that we use to improve our lives. Most immediately in the workplace, but in the broader community as well. So I don't see why restaurant jobs can't be good union jobs. There was a time in this country, decades ago where it was much more common for folks to be able to live off of one job, sustainably. In fact, one income per family often without with little education. And that was thanks to the power of unions, the influence of unions in this country, where folks could, drop out of high school, go get a job at a factory or even in restaurants or other industries and make a decent enough living, right? And pensions were more common, benefits were more common. So those are some issues that come to my mind. I don't see why restaurant jobs have to be second class. And, I think folks make a mistake to assume that, well, it's just going to be kids that are working in these restaurants. That's never been my experience, that it's just kids. Even in fast food, it's not just kids. For one thing, they're open during the school day. I mean, just to put it out there on a practical matter. But yeah, there are plenty of folks, this is how they make a living. And I think that anyone who goes to work should be able to, at least sustain a decent enough life for themselves. Like, there shouldn't be jobs that pay poverty wages. Just bottom line. I mean, doesn't matter what it is. If it's a busboy or a server or a fry cook, doesn't matter. There shouldn't be jobs paying poverty wages. So, yeah, I encourage restaurant workers to organize. I think that is the path forward. Union of Southern Service Workers is doing some really cool stuff down here in the South, and I'm excited to see their growth and, organizing in places like Waffle House. So, that's the path forward, whether it's, a high-end restaurant talking about servers and stuff like that, or, fast food, fast casual, whatever. The path forward is for workers to organize collectively. And yes, they are going to fight very, very hard against it because the restaurant industry is traditionally anti-union and non-union. So it's going to be an uphill fight. But if we want restaurant jobs to be good jobs, that's how we do it. We unionize. Now, the specter of automation, I think, is out there. And they always float that out there. Oh, well, if you increase wages in the restaurant industry, there will be robot burger flippers. Okay. I'm not, scared about that. If the other jobs in the restaurant industry pay a living wage, right? If jobs pay living wages, automation is not as scary. Automation is scary because we don't currently have any control or influence over it. And so we have no way of protecting our jobs absent our union contracts. So, yeah, interesting fellow, interesting guy. I'm not surprised he didn't come on the show. But bottom line, restaurant workers do need to organize. It is the best path forward. And we have to organize everywhere. And something that, this reminds me of is the UAW interview we had this morning, talking about, they talk to anybody who comes by the union hall, anyone in town, right?
Right.
And we, you and I are both familiar enough with some of the history of the UMWA, the coal miners union here in Alabama. And I mean, they unionized basically all of Walker County. Mm-hmm. Everybody who worked in the county just about was organized by the coal miners union, even school principals. So, that's the sort of approach we need. And I think it's really cool that in Minneapolis, there's a strong labor movement. They've been doing coordinated bargaining and aligning their contracts. And so it's not a surprise to see this growth in the restaurant industry there with unions. But that's where we need to do, those strategic approaches and really leverage the unions we already have to bust into new industries.
Yeah. We got a couple quick stories that we want to get to for you. Teamsters have really been making some gains at Amazon across the country. And so one of these gains happened in San Bernardino, California, where there was a wildfire that created a state of emergency, an officially declared state of emergency. And Amazon wanted people to keep working. Like there was no indication independently of Amazon without interference and organization from the workers that they would stop deliveries temporarily. And so obviously the workers were very concerned about this, and they had and they're organizing with the Teamsters, and they're not unionized yet, I don't believe, the workers at KSBD in San Bernardino. But they did organize a march on the boss. With 50 people went and spoke to the supervisor, and they were able to get the entire shift be allowed to go home, not just go home, but to go home with pay because of the dangerous wildfire smoke. And that is really huge, I think. And being able to do things like that, acting like a union before you get a union, delivering wins for people in the immediate, I think is really important for building credibility and showing that the Teamsters are serious in this warehouse about organizing the workplace. And I think that it's going to build their credibility, nationwide, right? And I have to say, I hadn't voiced this concern publicly, I don't think I had said it on the show. But, I was really concerned about the extent to which the Teamsters, under the leadership of President Sean O'Brien, was committed to organizing. Because in the aftermath of the UPS contract negotiations, there was not a big, flashy kind of campaign announcement vis-a-vis the UAW and the non-union automakers, right? I mean, the UAW made a big thing about like, we're keeping going. We're going to organize the entire non-union automotive sector. And there has not been a similar kind of dynamic from the Teamsters relating to the non-union logistics industry, looking at employers like FedEx and Amazon. There just wasn't a similar kind of big thing going on there. But I said this on Twitter last week. There was like 3 weeks in a row ending last week where the Teamsters made up a full more than half, a majority of the new organizing going on in the South, both by number of workplaces and by number of employees being organized. And at disparate employers, like all over the place, just different kinds of stuff. And then we see stuff like this, like what happened in San Bernardino, a March on the Boss organized by people organizing with the Teamsters Union that was able to get people sent home with pay. That I do think I have now amended my, rescinded, I think, my concern that I had had myself in my head about the Teamsters' commitment to organizing. It does seem like they are really committed to organizing, whatever kind of political disagreements that you have with the leadership, of which I have plenty. But I appreciate that, and I think that's really important. And I think I would even if you give me somebody who like says things in exactly the same way that I would say it in all instances relating to politics, but who is not doing real organizing on the ground across the country in relevant industries, versus somebody that I do disagree with politically, but who is organizing and committing the organization that they lead to organizing, I think I take the latter.
Oh, 100%.
Absolutely. And so
because the bottom line is we got to have more workers who are organized. Like, we have to have more workers in unions. We have to have more workers talking to other workers. Like, all of that has to be happening, politics aside, because the politics is going to be downstream from that.
Exactly. And so I'm really, really happy to see this kind of stuff from San Bernardino. And that was not the only Amazon Teamster win that we got last week. Last week, Amazon announced that they were raising the minimum wage at for drivers across the country at their contract delivery for their contract delivery drivers, who are not their employers, by the way, but they also have the ability to unilaterally increase the minimum wage for these people all across the country, even though they're not their employer. But we'll leave that. We won't comment too much on that. But so Amazon is hiking its average national pay for contracted delivery drivers to roughly $22 an hour, up from $20.50 an hour immediately. And again, this is as a result. This is not you're not going to be able to draw as direct a line. The San Bernardino story was like super. The union with the work. The union was able. We marched on the boss, and then our people got sent home with pay. Right? That's super direct. The union did this, and it's going to be a lot easier for the company to obscure this pay increase as not related to the union organizing, but it very clearly is. It is very clearly related to the union organizing, and it is up to us, people like us, and folks like our listeners and other Amazon workers who are interested in this kind of stuff, to make sure that their fellow employees recognize that this is because of their fear of unionization. And so that's great to see. That's great to see. We have an Amazon Teamster in the chat saying that I can confirm, as an Amazon worker at KCVG in Northern Kentucky, Teamsters are here on the ground with more showing up every day, and we are starting to make some real progress here. And so that is just, I had been feeling real down because all the Teamster news over the last month or so had been real political in nature, and it was real kind of depressing because I have some political disagreements with some of the moves that the Teamsters are making nationally, but this has really elevated my spirits. This recent spat of news about the Teamsters and Amazon. So I'm looking forward to continuing to see stuff like this come out, and for the Teamsters to unionize Amazon and to unionize FedEx and to finish the unionization of Costco and DHL and UNFI and all the other places that they're organizing at. So really cool news. I'm excited about that. You should be too. We only have just a couple of minutes before our guests jump on the line. We're going to be talking to Boeing worker and a LaborNotes writer about what's going on at Boeing. So we don't have time for a long segment. Do you want to do maybe the Autobahn or SPLC stuff, Adam?
Well, like you said, we don't have a whole lot of time, but yeah, we can just mention, we mentioned it earlier in last week in Southern Labor, I believe, that the SPLC union, the Southern Poverty Law Centers union, expressed no confidence in the CEO. And this also comes amid struggle at another nonprofit, another big, established, well-off nonprofit, the Audubon Society. And in that case, those workers are represented by CWA. They call themselves the Bird Union. You should definitely follow them online. They're worth a follow for sure. Things were heating up really big lately with the Bird Union because the Audubon Society has been just really vicious in the way they have treated the union. They have been dragging their feet in contract negotiations. They actually, the nonprofit joined Elon Musk in challenging the constitutionality of labor law. So, basically, the NLRB issued a complaint against the National Audubon Society for violating federal labor law and unlawfully discriminating against its own employees for union membership. The complaint consolidates 11 instances when Audubon broke the law and violated the rights of its union workforce, represented by the Communication Workers of America, CWA, Local 1180. And so, echoing the anti-worker strategy pioneered by Elon Musk and his SpaceX, Audubon's response to the NLRB complaint questioned the authority of NLRB administrative judges and claimed that, quote, the National Labor Relations Act, as interpreted and or applied in this matter, is unconstitutional, which is quite the approach to join in with other notorious labor law violators like Amazon, like Starbucks, and Elon Musk. They are apparently the first nonprofit to jump into this, as far as I can tell, though there was some dispute with the ACLU recently as well. And so, if we had more time, we could dive into it, but I wanted to just point that out there, that there are some really big nonprofits where organizing has happened, and we are seeing some of these, quote unquote progressive nonprofits are really showing their true face and showing what they're really about in the way that they treat their employees. So, whether it's at the SPLC, which has encountered a lot of layoffs, and now the union is expressing no confidence by an overwhelming vote. Over 90% voted no confidence in the CEO. And then the Audubon Society, the good news with the Audubon Society is they did actually reach a tentative agreement. They were scheduled for an unfair labor practice strike coming up. That would have been happening this month. But finally, I guess the board or the nonprofit finally blinked a little bit. And so now there is a tentative agreement. Jacob, you said that they passed that agreement. They ratified that, I guess, this week.
Yeah, I thought so, because they were voting on it from September the 10th to the 12th.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, so at least some promising news there. But I did want to just lift up that, I think it's really important that folks in these nonprofits be organizing. For better or worse, these nonprofits have a lot of resources and do some important jobs and do some important tasks. And it's important that the workers themselves have representation. And I think it helps the movement overall. If those people enter our movement, and if we can, steer some of these organizations in a better direction, in a more labor-friendly direction, I think that's overall a really positive thing. Just like, the phenomena with more journalists and newsrooms that are organizing, which I think has gotten us better coverage in terms of labor unions in the movement. So same concept there. I think the more organizing happens at nonprofits, the better. And I would encourage folks to really, take it on, even though as Audubon and SPLC and some of these others demonstrate, it may be just as tough as organizing in the private sector, despite whatever rhetoric may come from, your bosses. It could be just as difficult, but thankfully not all are like that. There are, plenty of labor-friendly nonprofits that are out there, and, have unionized staffs and also have, explicitly pro-labor policies. And so, there's a lot of different ones out there. You can't all judge them. You can't judge them all by, a few of these bad actors. But whether it's a really progressive one or one that's just maybe progressive in name only, at the end of the day, the workers themselves have to have representation. They have to build power themselves. That's how you're going to protect yourselves and, be able to actually do your job and try to uphold the mission that you are trying to carry out in the course of your job.
Yep. We have now in the Zoom Jon Voss and Jenny Brown. Jon is a worker at Boeing in the Pacific Northwest, I believe in Seattle. Also a steward with the International Association of Machinists, District Lodge 751, where they are now on strike. He and 32,000 other workers at Boeing in the Pacific Northwest. After having voted down a tentative agreement that was recommended by the district president and the entire negotiating committee, the 32,000 folks voted to reject the tentative agreement by about 95% and voted to go on strike by about 97%. So we're going to be talking about that. We also have on the line Jenny Brown, a editor at LaborNotes, labor journalist, organizer, things like that. Jenny, Jon, welcome to the program. Thanks for taking the time.
Great to be here.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Glad to have you. And Jon, in particular, appreciate you making the sacrifice of interrupting your sleep schedule to jump on the call for the listeners. Jon said he has been on second shift for 14 years. So I really do appreciate you making the sacrifice to be on this early in the morning, as it were. And I
appreciate it.
Yeah, and it is a little bit earlier where you're at. It's about 10 a.m. Where you're at, whereas it's noon here. So Jon, I guess to start off with, before we get into the tentative agreement and maybe some issues with that, can you give us some background on Boeing and the union there generally? Right? You've had a collective bargaining agreement there since 2008. You haven't been able to negotiate a new one since that time. I think I have never heard of a CBA being in place that long. And so there has been some pent-up frustration against the company from the workers. Can you tell us why?
Yeah. So I wasn't there in 2008, but the contract that was agreed upon at that time had been extended twice. Once in 2011, and then the second time, which was basically just an extortion tactic from the company, was in January 3rd of 2014 is when it passed. And I think everybody knows the history to that, but that had been in place from 2016 up until about 2 or 3 days ago.
Well, I think if you don't mind, and you don't have to spend just too long on it, but I think you might overestimate the degree to which people are familiar with that. I think it would be worth going into at least a little bit of that, what happened in 2013. I only know about it because I've read some stuff in recent days, so I think some folks would be interested in that.
Sure, fair. I've also somewhat lost my voice, so when I stop randomly, I apologize.
Sure.
In around 2013, there was, like I said, I call it an extortion campaign from the Boeing company. They threatened to remove a lot of people's livelihoods. They threatened to take work away from the Pacific Northwest. They, absolutely despised us as workers. There was this immense pressure put on all workers from north to south end throughout the Puget Sound to accept some sort of basically absolute takeaway extension. And that first offer got rid of, health insurance almost entirely. Not entirely, but the cost overruns were ridiculous. They still were up until just recently when the contract has ended. Progressions to reach the max wage, I think, were something like 19 years. Minimal wage general wage increases, loss of additional retirements, and just an onslaught. And that was rejected, I want to say November 2013. I could be wrong on the month, but shortly after that, there was a change in the company's tune about what they were going to do. They made some changes to the offer. And then on January 3rd, due to some overruling from some former international players, let's say, we were forced into vote on that contract when a lot of people were out on vacations, extended vacations. Let me explain that real quick. Towards the end of the year, we take about 12 to 13 days off for like a winter break, so to say, for Christmas, New Year's, and whatnot. And a lot of people with seasoned experience there would extend their breaks a little bit longer, go on longer vacations, let their body relax because the work we do is hard. And so a lot of people were out on that day that the vote took place, and it passed by one of the smallest margins ever. And that locked in a 8-year extension on top of a additional 4-year extension from the 2008 agreement. And so now it has ended, 2 days ago, and that is the short version of what happened with the extension. So it wasn't like a 16-year contract specifically, but it was a 16-year contract.
Right. And one of the things that I read about was that the wages. There was something like a decade where there were not any raises.
More than less, yes. It was a 1% general wage increase every other year, and then I think at one point there was a 2-year gap where there was no general wage increase at all. And so effectively, there were some increases, but not anywhere close to keeping up with regular inflation. Not even to mention the hyperinflation is not the correct term, but you know what I mean. The excessive inflation that has been going on the last 3 or 4 years. So we have fallen way behind, even where we were from 2014, 15, 16 time period. We were way behind.
Right, and that was something that I think, Jenny, you mentioned in your article that as inflation has eaten away at the higher wages that the machinists were able to win previously because there were not accompanying wage increases. Now, the minimum wage is what did you say, $19 an hour? And you can get retail jobs.
So in Seattle, the minimum wage is now $19.95, and one of the guys, a 36-year mechanic who was on the line, talked to us yesterday, and he explained it like when he hired in, the starting wage was about 2.5 times the minimum wage, and then you maxed out at like 4 times the minimum wage. Now the starting wage is basically the minimum wage, and you max out at about 2.5 times the minimum wage. So that kind of illustrates like what has happened to Boeing wages over the last decades.
Right. And that really is something that, working for one of the nation's kind of preeminent defense contractors, maker of commercial airplanes, the starting wage is the lowest it can legally be in Seattle. I mean, that's really something. And this is, unfortunately, a pretty common thing. I have friends who worked who spent decades in the paper industry, and they talk about how when I got on, they'll say in the 70s or the 80s, you basically had to kill somebody to get to get a paper job, right? And now they can't keep people in. I talked to some folks at a paper mill lockout a couple of years ago in Alabama, and the median tenure at the company was 20 years, right? And that is not indicative of like, oh, people love this company, so they stay a long time. That means they can't keep new people, right? And so it sounds like there's a very similar dynamic going on here at Boeing. And so, that brings us to today. We got there was a tentative agreement. There was a lot of energy, clearly, from the pent up kind of anger and resentment over all of these years of things staying the same as far as your wages and working conditions, and some amount of deterioration as prices increase. And so there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of energy. You filled literally a baseball stadium at the beginning of contract negotiations. And the negotiating committee came back with a tentative agreement that was, as I said at the top, resoundingly rejected. John, can you tell us some of the things that were in the tentative agreement?
Let me just rattle off all 336 pages real quick. There were some improvements made to a lot of different things. I couldn't go through every single one of them. There were improvements that were offered. What I can say is that the resounding message from everybody I've spoken to, the thousands of members I've heard directly from, is that there were improvements. They just aren't enough, right? Like Boeing moved the needle, but they need to move it much further. One of the primary areas of focus, I would say, would be, and this is general, of course, but all levels of economics. Money talks. And this used to be a job where you could have a single family income. You could raise a family with just one Boeing job. And now Boeing has people who are homeless, people who sleep in their cars, people that have multiple roommates just to get by, and people who can't move out of their parents' houses. Boeing can be a single family income again. It would not be that detrimental to them. If anything, it would be only to their benefit to provide the workers the things they need to not just survive here, but to thrive, as we did for decades as Boeing workers. So I think the economics, Boeing really needs to just take a look at that and say, the workers here deserve better. And to quote somebody from Jeffries, a Sheila, who has a last name that I'm not going to try to pronounce because I would be rude and butcher it. There was a title in a Bloomberg article around August 29th. It says, "Can Boeing afford the union's demands?" Yes, according to Sheila. The cost or the damage from a strike would outweigh the cost of keeping the workers content. So by literally giving us everything, and she broke this down on how many airplanes it would cost and this and that, and I'm not going to try to explain everything that an analyst can explain in better terminology than I do, but effectively it wasn't going to cost the company anything to give us 100% of everything we were asking for. The offer they gave us was nowhere close to that. So, call me crazy for saying a Wall Street person's finally on our side, but I think their math is correct, and Boeing should just step up and deliver the things that we need. Right.
And it is worth knowing that when you had dynamics like Jenny was talking about, where the starting wage was 2.5 times the minimum wage. You could get up to 4 times the minimum wage, and there was a pension and things like this. That was the time when Boeing was like at the height of its reputation, right? I mean, the saying was, if it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. And now there's a very different sentiment about Boeing airplanes right now, even as working conditions have gotten worse at Boeing, and workers are more exploited, and people are making more profits at the top. And we are encouraged to believe that the more profit a company makes, the better the product is, kind of more or less in our society. And it seems like that is not the case. The financials, one of the things that was touted was that there was a 25% wage increase, but John, I want to make sure that I'm correct on this. It also, one of the things that changed in the contract was that they removed a guaranteed annual bonus completely, that would range from 3 to 6%. And so over the life of the contract, depending on your performance, where you're getting between a 3 and 6% increase, some people would see like a 12% raise maybe actually over the 4 or 5 years of the contract. And others would see 0% if they regularly got the top bonus pay. Is that right?
I want to say there is some accuracy to a lot of that. Without it all in front of me directly, I couldn't say specifically, but the bonus structure I can talk to that was removed, and it wasn't a guarantee. As a matter of fact, the Boeing company would argue yearly to try to keep that bonus structure as low as possible. At one point, I think they gave us 1.2% of a bonus, and then in a year when they were doing very well, and by well I mean pushing trillions of dollars effectively, they gave us 5.5 or 5.6 or something like that percent, which still doesn't make up for what we actually deserved in a bonus. And so there were a lot of strings attached to that bonus plan, and to see it go away entirely, I don't think is fair. But to say that it needed to be improved significantly is, and I believe that's a sentiment that is felt all around, all around the rank and file, is that, we deserve bonuses. We deserve significant wage increases. We deserve guaranteed retirement. We deserve, a future to believe in, and we deserve to feel like more than just a number to the Boeing company, because that's effectively how we're treated.
I'm interested in both of your reactions to this. Jenny, I'll start with you. This tentative agreement was again, recommended by the district president and the entire negotiating committee, and it was rejected by something like 95%. And you've talked to, at this point, it seems like several Boeing workers from the articles that you've written, and folks should check those out. There's going to be information in those articles that we're not going to be able to get to. I'd recommend folks read the articles that Jenny wrote at LaborNotes, and then subscribe to LaborNotes, et cetera, et cetera. What are some of the things that you're picking up as you're talking to these Boeing workers about why it seems like there's a division between some of the people who are negotiating the contract and the rest of the members?
Yeah, and between what the Boeing company thought was going to happen and what actually happened, right? So it's possible that since the contract was kind of on a par with what the union at Spirit Aerosystems, which used to be part of Boeing and is now not, but they're in Wichita. They took a week-long strike last year, and they got sort of close to the same financials, although there were some changes. But the problem is that if you look at like the living wage in Wichita versus the living wage in the Seattle area, it's about $10 less in the Wichita area. So that might have gone into like the thought that, okay, well, this is enough. Either both the company thinking that it was enough to get it passed, and maybe the bargaining committee. But it's also possible, and some of the people that we've talked to on the picket line were also suggesting that there may have been something in the contract that the negotiating team really wanted, and they agreed to recommend the contract, perhaps knowing that the whole contract was not going to fly. Because I think there's pretty much an awareness as soon as people saw this that they were not going to accept it, and that the company had a lot further to go on really catching people up on this period where they've really seen nothing move on the wages. So and then in addition to which, losing your defined benefit pension, you can have a lot of 401ks, but those go up and down with the stock market. It's really like, a gamble, and a defined benefit pension is something that people can bank on and I've talked to people on the picket line who joined at Boeing, took a pay cut to get that pension, and then the pension was taken away. And, people who have been there for a while can calculate just how much they lost by losing that pension. So the pension and the basically 40% increase on the wages overall are the two things that people are really citing as the most important. And, that's actually, I think, not really asking for much, given how much the Boeing company has spent in stock buybacks in this same period where workers were seeing like less than 0.5% raise every year, they were spending $38 billion. So from 2011 to 2018, they were spending $38 billion in stock buybacks, which is basically to juice the stock price and make sure that the people in the C-suite got, a lot of money from when they're compensated in stock. But it doesn't help the company produce airplanes, right? The money's not going into retooling or any of the things that the company needs to do. And now they're crying alligator tears. Oh, we don't have the money. But back then they seem to be happy to just sort of hollow out the company. And so in a way, I think, and this I've been hearing a lot from people, is like the union is going to save this company from itself, because one, if you give people decent pay, they're going to stick around and they're going to do a good job. If you don't give people decent pay, there's going to be constant turnover. People are going to be out the door, right? And this is what happened during COVID. They lost a lot of qualified people, not coincidentally, right after they got rid of the defined benefit pension. So, that's where the quality comes from, is the people. And then they need to listen to the workers about what's going on the shop floor. And that's the other thing. In the contract is getting more ability to grieve on some of these issues, which are for safety for the flying public. Like you can grieve a safety issue where it's the workers in danger, but you can't normally grieve a safety issue where it's the flying public's going to be in danger if we don't do this right. And so getting some of that, that's kind of like one of the ways the workers can get this company righted, right? But they need to get the money, is the main thing that I'm hearing from people.
Right. John, does that track with some of the things that you're hearing from your coworkers? And I'm interested in any sort of expanding that you can do on some of those thoughts. And then also, what Jenny was talking about as far as the being able to grieve safety of the public concerns. One of the other things that I know that the machinist was gunning for was a board seat at Boeing. Did this TA include a board seat? And if not, is that one of the things that folks are interested in seeing, a board seat for a union representative and grieving some of the safety of the public stuff? Interested in your thoughts on all that.
Okay, that's like 5 questions, so yes. Forgive me when I forget a couple of them and I start to answer. So one, I agree with everything that Jenny just said, that there are, that the economics are definitely a significant factor of it. The one thing I would say is that there's, 33,000 or so of us, and 33,000 or so people have every single right to be angry about everything that they want to be angry about. I do believe that there was a little bit, I'm not going to say a misunderstanding, but an expectation of the Boeing company to treat our negotiators as humans. And as we've experienced at the Boeing company, that they barely treat us as humans. And so having not been at the negotiation table myself, having not known exactly what transpired there, I expected Boeing to treat our negotiators just as they treated everybody else, which was poorly. And, I can't say that they did anything wrong or illegal, or, I'm not going to, create a theory that they did something wrong. But this is the company that has been threatening us to take jobs away for forever. This is the company that stole our pension. This was the company that called us essential during COVID when a lot of people got to work from home and we had to work shoulder to shoulder, elbows to assholes. Sorry if I'm allowed to cuss on here. In the planes when it, at times where it was risky. And then they did remove additional work. They consolidated the 787 line down to South Carolina without any input from us. So, what took place in the negotiations table, like I said, I don't know, but I expect the company that, that basically pressured a whistleblower to commit suicide to treat our negotiators like crap. And that bad things probably were going to be shared by the company, with the public about that, and to try to divide us. And what we just showed everybody of the way we vote is that we're not divided on how we feel about the company and what we deserve. As to the board seat, I don't remember specifically the language, whether we have anybody there or not. I believe the proposal was to a non-paid, a non-paid spot at the board seat. Maybe there's voting rights, maybe there's not. I don't know how that works. I'm a mechanic. I don't know how that works. But it would be important for us to have an IM representative on the board, because obviously the board doesn't know how to steer their own ship. And so, as Jenny had said earlier, that we want to save Boeing from themselves. That is one way that we do it. A seat at every table is essential for any organization anywhere. And to have an IAM member sitting there, I think, is very important. We have to save Boeing from themselves. And we will do that with, representation at the board, at the shareholders meetings, at the events, whatever it is, we should be there.
Jenny, I'm interested in how you are seeing this as somebody who has covered a lot of the other big national labor stories and talked to folks involved in some of these big national labor stories, like the UAW contract negotiations with the Big Three, the Teamsters at UPS. How do you put this in the, how do you fit all of these puzzle pieces together?
Yeah, I mean, so I think in all of those three examples, the member mobilization has been really visible. In the case of the Teamsters at UPS, they were doing practice pickets before work leading up to the contract. So in the morning before going to work, they're letting the company know that they're ready to walk out. Now, the machinists at Boeing have been very militant and willing to strike, since the 1940s. So this union has a strong tradition at Boeing. So that's not new, but they did do this, as you said, 99.9% sanction strike vote in July, and then there have been marches in the plants on break for months, right around the contract. And so I think in the case of all three, the UAW at the Big Three, the Teamsters at UPS, and in the case of the machinists at Boeing, the union has raised expectations, which had not been the case with previous leadership in some of those unions. And so we saw the machinists set out ambitious bargaining targets and then mobilize workers around them. And so in all cases, people are not willing to go back to contracts that just tread water. And they demanded more, rightly, in all three cases, given how the last decades have been just a operation vacuuming money out of workers' pockets to the extreme rich. So I think that's really been good. And then another thing that's similar to the UPS campaign is that the Boeing company, I think, is very vulnerable and can be pushed. With UPS, the leverage came from basically the fact that there are other shipping companies that can take up some of the slack in a strike, and they might become the customer's preferred carrier. So UPS is very worried about strikes in that case. In the case of Boeing, they're way behind on their plane orders, for reasons that John can tell you. And they're also short on cash. Their credit rating is just above junk bond rating, which means that they have to pay more to borrow money. But the main thing that makes them vulnerable is that they have only just, their suppliers are dependent on orders from Boeing, right? And as happened during COVID, a strike could disrupt those supply chains and they could lose suppliers. The suppliers could lay people off. They could belly up. Their own suppliers to the suppliers could stop being able to provide that material. So leading to all kinds of additional problems, which we saw, and they've only just recovered from that COVID period where that was a real big problem. So I think it's now really that the company has an incentive to settle and get people back in the door. So I think it's a good time to strike, and I think that they should that they should have a good chance of getting some of their goals. That said, for Boeing, the cost of labor to make an airplane is really only 5% of what they're paying. So so the amount of money that, I mean, even if they, as John was telling me, even if they doubled the wages, it's nothing to Boeing compared to what they're paying for supplies and all of this other stuff. So, they could easily absorb those costs. And a long strike could cost way more than the cost of giving workers the 40%, 10% per year for the life of the contract that they really need to be able to catch up on their wages. So I think it's good. The other thing that you see in these contract campaigns is, which had not been true in the last few years, is that the membership has been kept much more in the loop on what was happening at the bargaining table than in past administrations at all, definitely at the UAW and UPS, and then you heard the stuff about the 2013 negotiations and the machinists. So that contributes to members owning the fight, raising their expectations, and rather than just thinking, oh, there are lawyers in the room, they'll take care of it, members can see that their actions are giving the negotiation team strength. So I think that's been true in all three of those cases too.
John, as we're wrapping up here, and I'll give y'all an opportunity to mention anything else that you think is important for the audience to understand, but we're a radio program in the South. We're union members in the South, and so organizing the South is a very important issue to us. It's something of a theme on the show, and there is a Boeing plant in South Carolina. I'm interested in, what the concern or risk is of production being moved from the Pacific Northwest to South Carolina. Like, is that even physically possible at this point? I don't know the scale of the two manufacturing centers that Boeing has in South Carolina and the Pacific Northwest. So is that even physically possible? If yes, what are the risks there? And then how are workers in the machinist union where you're at? How are they viewing the task of organizing the plant in South Carolina? Is this something that is top of mind for them, that they want the union to prioritize after you win a fair contract, or is it something that folks don't really think about? I'm interested in that.
So I don't know the exact capacity abilities of the facility in Charleston. I don't believe it has the square footage anywhere close to do what they would like to do. I don't know how many planes they want to produce out of there at the moment, but I don't know that it has square footage to increase much more than it is. But I know the Everett facility has endless space to build not just 787s, but also the next airplane and the next airplane and the next airplane and the next airplane. And the Pacific Northwest is ready to do that. As it relates to the workers in South Carolina, people in my shop floors say, repeatedly say, we see how Boeing treats us. I don't know how they treat them down there, but they deserve a union. And everybody everywhere deserves a union, as long as you're not, management, HR, executives, etc. Right? Like under the NLRA and then the Railroad National Labor Act. I can't talk today. This morning. Sorry. Everybody who has a right to join and form a union should. We need to unionize everybody everywhere. Now is the time. The iron is hot. Strike while the iron is hot. Everybody out there needs to unionize. And that applies to the workers in South Carolina. That applies to workers in every state and every industry.
Jon Voss, Boeing worker, steward for the International Association of Machinists, District Lodge 751. Jenny Brown is assistant editor at LaborNotes. John, Jenny, is there anything else that you want to make sure that you leave folks with before we let you go?
I would like to make one last comment, but I'll let Jenny go ahead if there's anything she would like to share.
No, go for it, John.
Okay, thank you. One, I want to say that I appreciate both of you for everything you're doing for the labor movement and everything you're doing for workers everywhere. Without, LaborNotes and without, news organizations and podcasts and these things out there, the word doesn't get out because the regular news, if anybody watches them any longer, won't talk about it, right? As it relates to us directly here, I want the whole world to know that we're not just fighting for ourselves and our families. We're fighting for our community. We're fighting for the state of Washington. We are fighting for the entire United States. We are fighting for the aerospace industry. We are fighting for workers everywhere, right? When the quote unquote best job in town is no longer the gold standard that it once was, then everybody else suffers, tremendously. We need to change that. We want to end the suffering, and we are here for everybody.
All right. John, Jenny, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, folks, that is going to be it for us this week on the Valley Labor Report. Appreciate your time. We're going to have some good guests lined up over the next couple of weeks. I have, from my national union, Jacqueline Simon, the policy director, coming on next week to talk about Elon Musk's efficiency commission and what a risk that poses to the federal service. So we'll be talking about that, among lots of other stuff next week. So appreciate everybody's time. Make sure you are subscribed everywhere that you can subscribe. You can donate to the program at tvlr.fm/donate. You can get our merch at tvlr.fm/store. Give us 5 stars if you're listening to us as a podcast. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Come out to the Troublemaker School in Alabama on October 19th. labornotes.org/Alabama 2024. And don't forget, if you're in Huntsville, there's a runoff in District 1 on September 24th. We'll have one more show before the runoff, so make sure that you vote and tune in to follow the North Alabama Area Labor Council on Facebook for more information about endorsements. So it's going to be it for us this week, folks. See you next week. All power to the workers.